The story begins with a description of our heroine's feelings because she thought that she had already gotten used to it, but in fact she still felt awkward. Perhaps it was because of the chilling gray eyes that looked at her, as if burning right through her. When they first met, the girl couldn't even imagine that he would look at her like that. When she asked where they were going to do it today, the guy replied his cheek. It's just that at the moment he's wearing gloves and uniform, so it's better to do it on the cheek. Our heroine objected that he could take off his gloves, but the young man replied that no, because his hands were cold. The girl held the magic crystal towards his face and said that she was measuring his temperature. The young man was cold, but not like before. If he felt hot, then let him just say so. The guy replied that she doesn't change because she knows perfectly well that he doesn't get hot. Dianta stated that he was not yet completely cured. Perhaps one day he would feel a fever. The young man took her hand and said that this would not happen, after which he added that she was always very warm. The girl was reborn as the heroine of a book. At first, her life was the same as everyone else's. But because of her carelessness, an accident occurred, after which she remembered her past life. Dianta had an accident at the age of 19, and her present became the world of the novel in which she was stuck. The main plot revolved around misunderstandings between the main characters. She had often read such books in the past. They had a special charm when during reading, your hands began to sweat and your heart began to beat faster. However, the story is interesting to read while it remains on the pages of the book. The guy stated that it seemed like she liked someone else. What should he do? The girl replied that he simply saw her talking to another man and misunderstood. This handsome guy is her real older brother, whose name is Haint Valerian, and he is none other than the main character of the novel. The main hobby of a young man is to suffer over all sorts of nonsense. The young man said that his beloved had said that she liked someone. Our heroine objected that this person could be him. When her brother exclaimed that this simply couldn't be, Dianta asked why, since he had become very close to her lately. The young man added that he didn't think it was true, since he had many shortcomings. Our heroine thought to herself that she really wanted to hit him since he was impenetrable. After all, this is not the first time that she, as a younger sister, has had to watch his senseless whining and self-digging. According to the storyline, the main characters will spend another 3 years doing nonsense, completely not understanding each other. It would be better for her to put an end to this madness, at least for the sake of her own peace of mind. Exactly 1 year later, Dianta congratulated Sharon Raffaello, who is the main character of the novel, on her engagement. No one even suspects how much work she had during this year. She rarely attended events since childhood, so she and Sharon had few opportunities to meet. At first, her older brother told her about Raffaello, but it turned out that they were the same age and had a lot in common here. At some point, it turned out that the girls became real friends. But naturally, all this happened thanks to the fact that she made great efforts to bring the two main characters closer together. However, it was no longer so important since the day of reward for all her suffering had finally arrived. Our heroine stated that her friend decided to wear this dress after all, and it suits her very well. Sharon replied that yes, she decided to wear the outfit that they chose together because Dianta is one of those who knows her very well. The girl said that it was time for her to go, and she should get ready and also come to the engagement. The main character thanked her for helping her so much in her preparation. Generally, this should be done by relatives, but Raffaello's parents passed away early and her brother is too far away. The friend must have been very lonely in this huge mansion, but after the engagement ended, there would be a happy ending. Suddenly, a cry came from outside that the man had a letter from the Duke of Iberk, so the gates had to be opened immediately. Dianta did not understand what kind of urgent news could be on the day of engagement. Maybe regrets that he could not attend the celebration of his beloved sister, or something connected with the blessing. When the night rushed past, goosebumps ran all over the girl's body. But don't get too worked up about it, because there's only a happy ending ahead for everyone. However, that day they received news from Raffaello about the break in the engagement. It should have been a happy day when the guys were officially announced as engaged. A celebration that everyone only blessed, and the two loving people who received this approval were incredibly happy. All around were the happy faces of loved ones who saw the young couple off to a happy start to their life together. Our heroine was really looking forward to this, but now her older brother got drunk every day out of boredom, and a close friend whined endlessly, washing her face with tears about her unhappy love. Moreover, According to the plot, there was even a villain who gained Dianta's trust and tried to slander that it was she who was to blame for their breakup. There was even an episode where her life was in danger. The girl tried to put an end to these constant misunderstandings, so for her, this engagement was something like the fruit of long and hard work since she played the role of Cupid. When a sad Sharon approached her, Dianta asked if everything was okay. Maybe something had happened. The main character quietly muttered that she had just talked to her older brother. The girl immediately noticed that he had just been glowing with happiness, but now he had suddenly become very gloomy. Were they not on good terms until the day of their engagement? She wouldn't have to mend their relationship after the wedding. What happened? Dianta asked. What happened? Did her brother behave somehow wrongly, or maybe offended her with something? Raffaello was trembling all over and exclaimed that it seemed to her that the engagement would not happen, and if it did, it would be only her fault. Up until this moment, they both looked so happy, and nothing foreshadowed trouble. But why did such a turn of events happen? Our heroine looked closely at her friend and asked if she could tell the reasons. Sharon whispered that a knight had arrived from the northern lands with a message from her brother. She had been very busy with the engagement, so she could only read it now. The young man could not allow their marriage. When she told him that she wanted to get engaged to Haint, he probably thought that she just really liked the young man. But as soon as she said that they were preparing for the ceremony, the guy replied that he could not allow an engagement to a young man whom he had not seen personally, but she does not want to part with her older brother because she loves him very much. Suddenly, Haint appeared asking his sister not to upset his fiancé. Raffaello objected that she had not upset her. The girl simply felt that she should tell hers. Then the maid came up to the main character and whispered something in her ear. Sharon's face immediately changed, and she said that she needed to step away for a while. Valerian immediately asked his sister to catch up with her. The girl asked why he didn't follow her himself. The young man replied that he would run after her right now, since he wanted to be close. But if he was not with the guests, bad rumors might start to spread. Dianta said she would be back soon, and thought it was just a routine problem that would be easy to solve. But when she opened the door, she saw her friend sobbing on the knight's shoulder, and he trying to calm her down. Those gray eyes that looked like a haze that had just appeared and was disappearing again, the man on whose chest Sharon could cry in peace. Could this really be the Duke? Our heroine often visited the Raffaello family house, so she saw portraits of her brother and sister many times. The younger one is a very bright person and looks like a sparkling blue lake, and the elder one was rather cold, to whom any interests were alien. The atmosphere was like in a thick fog. The portraits were painted when he was, and now the guy is already after numerous battles with monsters. His figure has probably changed, just like this knight who stands in front of her. The young man's hair was not silver, but his eyes were just as cold. Judging by the oppressive feeling she had inside, it was definitely Duke Iberk. When the guy put on the helmet, the girl asked if he was really going to leave right now. The young man replied that since he showed her the letter, let him sit in this room for a while, calm down, and wipe away his tears. He then added that he seemed to have not closed the door when he came in, so he would be right back. After which he told our heroine that the Duchess was crying now. So if she wanted to come in, then let her come in. But if not, then let her leave the room. Dianta noted to herself that he was simply awful. First she needed to calm down, but she was tormented by the question of why the guy left the northern lands. At the age of, he lost his parents and received the title of Duke from an early age. He saw the dark side of aristocratic society. His younger sister was always at the center of his choice, and he never disobeyed the emperor's order, which was tantamount to self-flagellation. In the imperial palace, they silently watched the young man, waiting for the moment and looking for his weak points. It was as if he was in exile in the north and had never left there, so I decided to return to that room in order to find out at least something. But when she opened the door, our heroine suddenly collided with the young man and accidentally touched him. The knight gave off such a frosty cold that her hand immediately began to freeze. Then it dawned on her that she had collided with Sharon's older brother, and she suddenly jumped back. Due to the sudden movement, something pinched her in the pelvic area, and she screamed loudly. The Duchess came out to the sounds of a strange commotion and asked in surprise what Dianta was doing there at all, and whether she was injured. Our heroine asked not to touch her, as it would only become more painful. The guy apologized for being too careless and not noticing her, and then added that he had to go and wouldn't interfere with their conversation. The girl said that Raffaello's eyes were swollen and his makeup was smudged. If she appears in front of guests like this, everyone will think that this is a marriage of convenience. But in principle, this can be fixed if you change your makeup a little and cover your face with a veil. Dianta decided to ask carefully who it was, because she was crying precisely because of that night, and whether Duke Raffaello had sent him by accident. Sharon replied that the young man had brought a message from his brother. Having handed it to our heroine, the girl asked her to read it, because she had cried so much that she had not had time to do it herself. This knight will stay in the palace for a month, so she would still find out about what was written in the letter. It was said there that as soon as everything was ready, let the sister come to the north together with the knight he had sent. Dianta exclaimed, "Has he completely lost his mind? What other northern lands?" She thought to herself that she couldn't let Sharon leave, so she needed to meet this Iberque. Dianta rattled off that there was no need to tell Haint anything, since it was too shocking news even for her, and she needed to get some fresh air and would be back soon. On the way, our heroine reflected on the fact that, in the novel, there was no episode where Raffaello had to go north. Apparently it happened that way, because she influenced the course of events. Judging by his knightly attire, he most likely rode in on a horse, so first the girl came to the stable. She really hoped that the guy hadn't left yet, but suddenly she heard a sound as if something heavy had fallen inside. Looking inside, Dianta saw that the young man was lying on the ground unconscious. Our heroine realized that he was suffering from magic poisoning, an unknown disease that only exists in the northern lands. In the novel, one alchemist accidentally discovered this disease. It only appears in visitors who have been in the north for a long time, so it is difficult to detect. Visitors who have been under the influence of magic for too long become infected with mana, which in this world is like a second heart. When mana becomes polluted, all physical processes in the body are disrupted. While a person is in the north, magic replaces it so the body works as before. This means that being in the northern lands ensures safety, but if a person leaves those places, he must urgently return back. This was the reason why Iberk had to resolve the relationship between the two main characters. The result she was so eager for was far from a happy ending. She was too keen on connecting two people. Therefore, she believed that poisoning by magic could serve as a reason to allow their marriage. But simply reading about it in a novel and seeing the disease in reality turned out to be completely different things. Our heroine can't leave it all like this, so she has to cope and find a solution to this problem. The girl hid the young man under a blanket, and the unsuspecting servant helped her put him on the horse. She thought to herself that it was good that she had memories from her past life. Dianta knew the alchemist who first discovered this disease. She then immediately went to Fernando's laboratory, although she did not know the exact location. As a result, the girl got lost, because she only knew that the chimney was always smoking there, and the laboratory itself looked very bright, as if real madness was happening there. After which, our heroine came across a house that fit this description very well. When she knocked on the door, Fernando Deer appeared, who irritably exclaimed that everyone was already very annoying and he did not need any newspapers. This young man had a great interest in the northern lands and magic poisoning, for which he personally visited there, and in the end invented a cure for the disease. When the guy began to abruptly close the door, the girl exclaimed that she does not sell newspapers or preach religion. She has a request for him related to the north. There is a hidden disease in this territory. It has an order for him, which is directly related to it. Deer thought that she looked a bit suspicious, appeared out of nowhere, talked about her problems, plus was dressed in a dress that was too fancy. Dianta added that if he doubted anything, he should look under the blanket, which is what the young man did. After which, he picked up the Duke on his shoulder and exclaimed that this was simply an ideal example. Let him come in quickly. The young man warned her to be careful of the floor when she entered the room. Fernando examined him and muttered that how was it possible for the whole body to be filled with magic? After all, his theory turned out to be correct. The girl said that she wanted him to cure him of this disease. The alchemist replied that it would be difficult, even though Deer was researching this area. Until recently, he had no confidence, so now there are no drugs or any developments in research. If this man dies, then let her hand over his corpse to him. Dianta exclaimed that she knew all the ingredients for making the medicine. You will need ice crystals that are imbued with the magic of the northern lands. You need to introduce holy water into these crystals, melt them in the fire, and introduce them into the patient's body. When there was a heavy pause, our heroine thought to herself that this looked very strange. She suddenly showed up and said that she knew the composition, so he could get it all wrong. The young man asked with distrust if anything else was needed. The girl answered that yes, since she did not know the proportions, that is why she came to him. But she thought to herself that she needed to distract him and hush up the situation. The young man muttered that the northern ice was actually not so easy to melt with ordinary fire. A fire immediately appeared in Dianta's hand, and she stated that there was no need to worry about it, since while she was here, this ingredient was the easiest to get. Disher was suspicious of her, but at the same time, he was very glad that there was a living test subject in the form of Iberk. So he replied that he would start mixing the ingredients right away. After some time, he gave her the medicine and said that he had first made it in medium proportions. Our heroine asked whether there would be any side effects for the sick young man. The alchemist replied that he had checked it with the fire from a candle, and the magic had not disappeared completely, but some part had become a little weaker. It would have the effect of a sedative. Dianta immediately approached the young man to check if the medicine would work. But as soon as she applied the crystal to it, the northern magic began to resist its influence. The guy muttered that it was surprising why such a reaction happened. The girl was indignant. How can he say that? Why doesn't it go away? Our heroine did not understand why at some point the magical power began to work against her will. She just wanted everyone to be happy, so now she's going to have a sad ending. When the room was illuminated by a bright blue fire, Valerian finally stopped understanding what was happening. Had she really killed the main character's brother? How can she now look into her friend's eyes? What will happen to her relationship with Haint? And if the capital authorities arrest her and put her in prison, then the news about the lady killer will immediately appear in the newspaper headlines. The alchemist muttered that he looked too normal to be dead, so he needed to write it down quickly. Dianta immediately looked at the young man and noted that his chest was rising and falling, which meant that he was breathing. Plus his facial expression was quite peaceful. Our heroine breathed a sigh of relief and thought to herself that it was good that he was alive. The guy wrote down that the fire was able to cleanse him a little from the effects of magic. When he wakes up, we'll need to ask him more about it. Valerian noted to himself that he was somehow abnormal, but still knew quite a lot about this disease, which meant he understood magic poisoning better than others. The fire did not burn for long. The flames gradually began to die out, and the acrid smoke and thin black ice completely disappeared. The girl noted that someone almost died, but continues to sleep soundly, and does not suspect anything. When she poked him with her finger to wake him up, there was no reaction. Then she decided that it was time to go, since she said that she would just get some fresh air and left the engagement. Everyone was probably worried, but the girl didn't have time to go far because the young man grabbed her hand. The young man muttered that she was so warm and simply looked into the distance. Our heroine asked him if everything was okay, but the guy didn't answer, so she guessed that he was just talking in his sleep. Finger by finger, Dianta detached the Duke's hand, and before leaving the laboratory, left him a note so that he would not be scared when he woke up in an unfamiliar place. In the letter, she explained how the boy ended up in this place and told about his illness called magic poisoning. And Fernando will definitely explain all the subtleties and details to him. Now she has no time to think about the Duke, as there are two important tasks. The first is to return home and listen to lectures from her parents, and the second is to console his older brother, who created chaos and disorder around him. This is an elusive genre of romantic fantasy. As the name suggests, the novel contains elements of fantasy, one of which is a special skill that the main character's family members possessed. Dianta exclaimed that it was good that he had caused the fire subconsciously without the intention of setting anyone on fire. Otherwise, he could have burned down the whole house. As you might have guessed, their family had the ability to summon fire. Direct descendants of the Valerian family can control it. Thanks to this ability, all members of their family had red hair and eyes. There were even tales that in their family, children were already born with fire. Haint, as soon as he and Sharon had problems, would immediately get drunk and start a fire since he was unable to control his powers. Our heroine exclaimed that it was enough to set everything on fire or let him not leave his room at all. Why was he constantly looking for alcohol and causing chaos throughout the estate? If a young man is so worried, then he should better go and meet his beloved tomorrow and ask what is going on with their engagement. Meanwhile, Ebek felt a piercing cold and did not understand what had happened. Perhaps he died because he took the lives of many other people. He thought that he would finally see her. Would he really have to leave this world without ever looking into her eyes? The guy hadn't seen Sharon for so long. So much time had passed since they were separated that it was even sad to think about it. One day, her sister sent her a portrait. The girl wrote that Dianta looks at her as if she knows everything in advance. She is very glad that she became friends with her. Raffaello also wrote about Haint, but every time he was mentioned, the brother felt as if Sharon was writing about him with special joy. When the young man first saw her, he realized that she recognized him in a normal situation. He would have killed her, but the guy knew that this would upset his sister, so he pretended that he didn't know anything. The cold he felt after leaving the north, he felt even more from touching her. Iberk had been running somewhere all his life and would forever remain an unhealed scar for his sister. The young man really doesn't want her to live the same life as him. They hadn't seen each other for so long. He still wanted to do a lot with her. Also talk about a lot. He was struggling with all his might in this abyss. But suddenly, he heard a voice as if the guy had already reached heaven. With every touch he felt warmth. And when she moved away, he did not want to let her go. It was as if that light was getting further and further, so he reached out his hand to grab it. When the young man suddenly woke up, the alchemist immediately asked how he felt. Perhaps he was very cold or hot. While Fernando was asking the next question about when his symptoms began to appear, the Duke grabbed him by the throat, after which the young man hissed what kind of place this was, and who he was anyway. The next day, our heroine immediately went to the laboratory. The guy said there was no need to worry, he was fine. Now the alchemist tried to ask how he was feeling, but the young man almost strangled him. Moreover, the Duke asked to make a magical item for him. Then she returned home, and she and her brother went to the Raffaello estate. The girl thought to herself that it was good that he had woken up. Wouldn't it be too strange if he asked his friend where the knight she had seen yesterday was? Upon arrival, Dianta noted that everything was the same as before, an unremarkable mansion without any frills. Usually, flowers are planted on the territory, but there was only a green lawn. This estate was kept in the same condition all year round, as if time had stood still there after Eberk's departure. Noticing that something was wrong with her brother, the girl asked if everything was okay with him. If the young man is so worried, then perhaps it would be better to talk outside. There is a greenhouse in the backyard. It will have a more welcoming atmosphere, and will be easier for him to talk. When the guy agreed, Dianta advised him to try on the way there, to talk to Sharon about different topics in order to diffuse the tense situation. The elder brother thanked her and said that it was good that he had such a sister. The greenhouse was not difficult to find, since our heroine spent a lot of time there while trying to bring these two together. It was the only colorful place in the estate, Dianta heard, that the flowers were planted by Raffaello's parents. Maybe that's why Sharon loved this place so much. On the way, our heroine heard strange sounds, reminiscent of a battle. Then she saw the Duke, who was training on his own. Valerian noted that he was very serious, perhaps upset that due to illness, he could not take his sister to the north himself. She also noticed that the young man's eyes had become a different color. Dianta greeted him, but thought to herself that perhaps he had taken the magic lenses from Fernando. The Duke replied that he could not say that he was in good health. Our heroine immediately started to leave, saying that then he should continue doing what he was doing, but the guy stopped her. The young man muttered that he had heard something from the alchemist. Apparently, there was not a drop of lie in these words. The young man is grateful to her for taking care of his younger sister, but this is completely different. If she told a lie, then Ebek will not forgive it. The girl thought that this was some kind of test, so she pretended not to understand what he was talking about. When the Duke took her hand, Valerian immediately felt this piercing cold, after which she sharply pulled her back and exclaimed that suddenly someone would see them, but the guy stated that it was not a lie. Our heroine replied that of course if you don't count Sharon, then she has no connection with him, so why cause harm without any reason? The guy said that she didn't even ask who his sister was, or the name of the unknown knight who suddenly spoke to her first. It dawned on Valerian that she had made a mistake, And yet the young man was checking her. But Ebek added that he was going to do it himself. Perhaps he would have to see her as often as Sharon in the next month, so he thought it was better to tell the truth right away. If she tells others about this, it will not end well for her. The girl was indignant why tell her this, because Raffaello is her friend, so she will keep his secret a secret. He just can't understand one thing, why he will see her as often as his sister. The Duke explained that according to the alchemist, if he needed to be in the capital for a long time, it was better to charge himself with energy opposite to the north in advance, before the symptoms of the disease appeared. Dianta exclaimed that if he simply needed fire, then she was not necessarily needed. He could use fire from the fireplace or from something else. The young man objected that there was no such reaction from other objects as from her fire, and there was no other way other than her personal presence to alleviate the attacks of his illness. Our heroine wondered if research had really advanced so much. First these magic lenses, then Fernando's words. If he had really managed to achieve such results while she was gone. Now it is clear why Ibex started talking about his sister and hinted at his identity under the pretext of Sharon. He hopes to receive help from Valerian at any time. Suddenly, the main character appeared warmly greeting her friend, and specially calling her brother by another name, Diego. Haint asked the girl who this young man was. She replied that he was probably seeing him for the first time. This is Sir Nathan Diego, who came from the north. He will stay for about a month and will accompany her everywhere. The young man muttered, "What does this mean? This is the same knight who brought the message." Raffaello decided to smooth out the tense atmosphere and exclaimed that since they had met, they could have some tea. After some time, Sharon said that they should chat for now, and in the meantime, she would bring dessert, which Sir Diego would surely like. Noticing the heavy pause that had fallen, Dianta thought to herself that she shouldn't be left alone with them. The younger brother hissed that there was a guy who came from the north, and Sharon was probably seeing him for the first time. But it feels like they are quite close to her. He thinks that the young man is friendlier at heart, although you can't tell from the outside. The Duke replied that he was quite sociable, unlike some. Valerian muttered that he was a little tense about the words he had spoken. When Diego replied that he had not said them for that purpose, our heroine thought to herself that that was enough. This was Raffaello's brother. Then the guy asked if he was acting like this, because the lady was paying attention to him. It was somehow very childish. If the Duke saw it, he would immediately deprive him of his title. Listening to this squabble, Dianta thought to herself that this could not go on any longer, so they needed to be stopped somehow. After which, a brilliant plan came to her mind, because Haint can recharge it with energy, so everyone will be happy, both the sister and the sister's husband. In this way, she will get rid of the constant presence of the Duke, and at the same time the guys will become friends. A little later, Sharon offered her brother to try a cake that was not as sweet as the previous one, but felt more tender, so he should like it. The young man noted that it was indeed tasty, and the girl added that she had prepared tea separately for him, and that it should be to his taste, unless his preferences had changed. Our heroine thought to herself that it was a very good thing she had sent the maids outside, because if any of them had seen this, they might have misunderstood the situation. Therefore, she decided that it was necessary to intervene, after which she asked for forgiveness, and said that on that day, she said that she would go for a little walk, but in fact she simply disappeared, wondering if her friend was scared. Raffaello replied that yes, but then Dianta sent a note, so everything is fine, and she also heard that the girl had not been feeling well since the morning. After she added that on top of everything else, there was such news, so she could imagine what state her friend was in. Our heroine replied that she had in fact deceived her. Then she began to mumble that she wrote in the note that she felt unwell, but in fact this was not true. She was very worried about something, so she wanted to say it. But suddenly, the young man whispered that she should not think of saying anything about the illness. Dianta was very confused, and Raffaello began to ask what really happened to her. Valerian reported that she had in fact run after Sir Diego, and told him that she could not be taken north, and then asked him to convey these words to the Duke. Fortunately, the knight was delighted with their friendship, so he agreed not to take her to her elder brother, and replied that he would talk to him. The main character immediately asked the young man if everything was really as she said. The guy looked at Dianta with a withering look. She thought to herself that she was already glad that thanks to the magic lenses, his eyes finally became normal. but he looks very scary." But suddenly, the young man confirmed her words and said that he had answered exactly that way. Since he personally needs to report to the Duke whether the lady is doing well at the estate, he will therefore personally observe her for a whole month. Therefore, he warns that they will see Mrs. Valerian very often. After this conversation, everyone was enveloped in an atmosphere of absolute awkwardness. Sharon said that she was sure that the young man would like these people, because there was no person in the world who would treat her as well as Hainty. Our heroine did not understand what kind of expression her younger brother had on his face, because he should be happy, but he was even more depressed. Plus, in front of the person who will be watching them for a whole month, it is necessary to simply demonstrate harmony and happiness. Suddenly, the young man asked what Dianta meant when he said that Sharon would not be taken north. A chill ran down the girl's spine because it was a secret, and she blurted it out by accident and didn't even notice because she was watching a Burke's reaction. The young man continued that if his sister had not mentioned this, would she have continued to hide this news from him? After this, the young man suddenly jumped up from his seat and said that he needed to go out. The main character started to get nervous and shouted that they needed to talk, that he should stop. Valerian thought that this situation needed to be corrected, so she said that she would follow him. But Raffaello exclaimed that it was not necessary, it would be right if she explained everything to him herself. The girl felt extremely awkward since this conversation would obviously take some time. So she decided it would be better to just leave, and said that she suddenly remembered that she had urgent things to do. When the Duke abruptly put the cup back on the saucer, Dianta actually shuddered because she was scared. The guy said that no matter what, he still couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Our heroine thought to herself that she really hoped that he was not going to interrogate her about how she found out about his illness. When the young man added that she had said that she would entrust this matter to her brother, but she had not meant a charge of energy, the girl did not understand what he was talking about. But Ebert continued that if so, he would tell her right away that it would be better for her to abandon the idea of trusting this to her brother. He doesn't like him that much yet, but the very thought that the guy will touch him makes him shudder. Our heroine was upset that her plan to make them friends had failed and muttered that it was good. Plus, he hates it when someone knows about his weaknesses. The young man hopes that she understood what he meant. Dianta replied that it meant that it was not entirely convenient for him, because she was Haint's sister. If the Duke did not object, then she could look for another person who controlled fire. The young man answered sharply, "No, only a completely stupid person would not have questions about his identity. Besides, he cannot trust those who act for their own benefit." The girl exclaimed that it was true, it would be better for his secret to be known to as few people as possible. After which, she added that there was a whole month ahead, so he could rely on her. She would make every effort to take care of him. Hearing these words, the young man smiled slightly and replied that he would then wait impatiently. The girl noted to herself that this was the first time she had seen him smile, or perhaps he was simply making fun of her. Then the Duke rose from the table and declared that, since they had agreed on everything, it was time for him to go. Valerian thought in confusion that maybe she should go home too, as she was very tired. Meanwhile, the maids were discussing what would be better to prepare now than to let the water cool down when the mistress called them. It is true, they say their mistress was the most beautiful at the ball, but how can one walk normally with such a weight? When our heroine approached them, the maids immediately greeted her, but she replied that it was not worth it, since she simply wanted to say that she was leaving, and they looked very busy. The women exclaimed that their mistress had received an invitation to a ball in honor of Her Highness's birthday, so they were doing everything possible to make her the most beautiful at this ball. Dianta muttered in surprise that she knew nothing about the princess's birthday. The maids asked that maybe she just didn't check the letters. It is said that this is a very important celebration before the princess comes of age, so invitations were sent to all the aristocrats. The girl thought that she had been so busy with the two main characters lately that she had not attended any balls or tea parties. She kept telling everyone that she was very busy and could drink tea herself. Gradually, even her parents stopped persuading her to go to any event, after which she thanked them for telling her and said that she had a lot to do. So it was time to go, let them tell Sharon and Haint to talk calmly. Dianta thought to herself that it wasn't such a bad idea to have a tea party since she had accidentally gotten some information. So she turned her entire room upside down and finally found the invitation. Deborah Frances Bastow is the princess of the empire and the sole heir to the throne. She didn't like Eberg, so she hated Sharon and constantly bullied her, the main villain of this novel. Why did the princess mock the main character? It all started with the former spouse's Raffaello, whose life suddenly began to change. But at that time, the emperor decided that this was an excellent opportunity to annex the Duchy of Raffaello, which boasted of its unlimited power. He intended to betroth his daughter to Eberg, but the boy refused to marry the princess for almost 4 years in a row. On the day the young man turned 19, the emperor decided to put pressure on him and offered him two options to choose from. The first to marry his daughter Deborah, and the second to go to the northern lands. If he had chosen marriage, his sister would have become a duchess, and she would have had to see from childhood all the dirt of the life of aristocrats, with all the unsightly details. Therefore, the young man without hesitation chose to go north. On the other hand, there remained the princess, who for so many years had suffered constant rejections from a man whom she did not even love. The next morning, the maid opened the curtains and said that there were many things in her room that needed to be put away today, while Dianta noted to herself that she seemed to have fallen asleep yesterday while reading the letter. When the maid asked if she had found what she was looking for, the girl replied that she had, since she was going to go with Sharon to a ball at the imperial palace, so she was looking for an invitation. It turns out it would be in days. All the normal dresses are probably sold out already, so we'll have to slightly alter what we already have. Hearing this, the maid exclaimed irritably that this would not do. It will be the same as smearing slop on your face and walking away like that. They have no time at all, so they need to leave immediately. After which, she shouted to another maid to clean the mistress's room instead of her. After some time, the girls found themselves at the Raffaello estate. Our heroine muttered that it was somehow awkward, and she felt extremely uneasy. Daisy exclaimed that she and Sharon had about the same body type. The lady must have prepared several outfits. Nothing to be done, she'll have to ask to borrow one. The lady will be only too happy to help her friend. So stop talking and let's go. The local maid greeted the girls and informed them that her mistress was currently in the dressing room, having a fittings. Once inside, they admired how many beautiful outfits and shoes there were around. It will probably take a lot of time to try everything on and choose just one thing. Suddenly, she saw the Duke and wondered what he was doing there. He was pretending to be a knight, so why did he come? She mentally asked him to leave if he had finished all his business, but out loud, she stated that apparently he had come here to fulfill some request. The guy replied that no, the lady asked him to help her choose a dress and said that he could just stand nearby and watch. Hearing a familiar voice, Sharon exclaimed that she was very glad that Dianta had come, because she was just so confused. The girl had chosen this dress but could not decide on the jewelry. The maids try so hard, but their opinions are divided, and her friend who has good taste, will she help her choose? Our heroine replied that of course she would definitely help her sort out this situation. Then the lady turned to the knight and asked if he could help her too, since the more people choose, the better the result will be. After examining all the jewels, it turned out that Dianta and the Duke chose the same piece of jewelry, and their hands touched on it. The girl immediately felt this incredible cold again, and it seemed that she was frozen. After which she calmed down a little, and noted that after all, she was not as cold as she had been before. Our heroine wondered why he didn't let go of her hand, because she was very cold. The guy whispered that he didn't want to let her go. The Duke only moved his lips, as if he was talking to himself, but she was able to read it from his lips. Valerian knows that he wants warmth because of his illness, but when he spoke with such a face and held her hand, she can still understand it, but those around her will clearly perceive it incorrectly. Then she noticed the expressions on the faces of the maids and Sharon, and was convinced that everything was as she thought. Dianta immediately started chattering that it seemed like he liked the decoration too. She also thought it would suit her friend very well, so let him give it to her personally. Raffaello exclaimed that she liked it very much. It was not for nothing that they both chose this jewel. The maids objected that she had just said that she did not like the too saturated green color. The girl thought to herself that while they were busy, it would be better to leave as quickly as possible and as far away from the Duke. But suddenly, the voice of Daisy was heard asking the lady to scold Valerian. Our heroine wondered why she had such a displeased expression on her face, and what she was going to tell us. The maid continued that this was a ball in the imperial palace, and she wanted to alter the outfit she already had. Raffaello muttered that she didn't ask because she thought her friend wouldn't want to go there. If she had known, she would have offered to prepare together. But then they all turned around abruptly and began whispering something among themselves. Our heroine did not understand what was happening, but it was clear that the girls were up to something. Then the women quickly brought her one dress, but Dianta said that it was too bright, so she could not wear it. But no one really listened to her opinion, since Sharon and the maid decided that it would suit the lady very well. Then Raffaello turned to her older brother and asked him what he thought. The young man replied that he could not tell anything by looking only at the dress, so it was necessary to put it on. After which he approached our heroine and began to apply the outfit to her body. Valerian thought that he was too close to her. When Dianta pulled back a little, the guy asked what was wrong. The girl replied that she thought the dress didn't suit her. The Duke whispered that there was still a whole month ahead. He would come even closer and touch her even more, so it would not be possible to constantly run away from him. After these words, Eberk again switched to Sharon and said that the dress suited her friend very well. Our heroine wanted to go home right away, but Raffaello suggested trying on other outfits, after which she dragged her behind the curtain and began to take out shoes along with jewelry. During the fitting, a friend asked if Haint was in a good mood. When he came back, Dianta replied that everything was fine. The guy was smiling happily all day. Our heroine was very glad that she managed to calm Sharon down at least a little. When they left the fitting room, the Duke sometimes allowed himself some unexpected remarks, such as that the dress suited her very well. After some time, she finally managed to escape from these endless fittings and changes of clothes. Already on the street, the maid said that she would go and prepare the carriage, and that Milady should come down quietly. Suddenly, the young man asked if her brother had always been such a simple person who gets angry himself and then immediately calms down. Dianta exclaimed that he was really eavesdropping. That was too much. The guy replied that he didn't intend to. He just had good hearing. The girl noted that they were deliberately speaking in whispers behind the curtain. How could he have heard everything? He is not only very strong, but also has amazing hearing. Or is this possible because he is a sword master? Iberk added that his sister had been a weak and fearful girl since childhood, so he always wanted a strong and strong-willed person to be by her side. Valerian thought to herself that Haint, of course, required her constant intervention, just like caring for the sweet potatoes. But he was her brother, so she would not allow her to speak about him like that. The guy continued that people of this type think first of all about themselves, do not listen to the opinions of others. And Sharon has a rather cautious and calm character. It will be difficult for her to be around such a person. If they both are too careful, it will be hard for both of them. Dianta countered that they just like each other. That's why they behave like that. Previously, my sister always listened to the opinions of others. This is a very nice quality before the debutante ball. A whole line of gentlemen lined up to her, who dreamed of becoming her partner. Our heroine exclaimed that in the Empire, in fact, her brother is also considered attractive. But she thought to herself that she had no idea that he would ever praise Haint. Suddenly, the maid's voice was heard, saying that she had to pack things, so it took some time. But now everything was ready, and they could go. The girl in a bad mood went downstairs, and agreed that it was necessary to go before it got dark. The Duke caught up with her, and declared that, to be honest, he could win against her brother in appearance. But it was his sister who could be considered the most beautiful lady in the Empire. Our heroine did not understand why he grabbed her, and why he was saying all this at all. The young man wished her a safe journey, and asked her to be careful on the road. Dianta noted to herself that it felt like he didn't have a drop of blood in his body, but he turned into a pulsating vein when it came to his sister. She was speechless, but he looked very cute. Finally, the guy added that those words were true. The dress with embroidered red roses suits her very well. Dianta blushed, but the guy continued that, after coming of age, he left the capital and did not have the opportunity to attend balls often. But if you compare her with all the ladies he had ever met, she looked very bright. He was sure that if a girl appeared in it at a ball, all eyes would be turned to her. Our heroine felt very awkward, so she stuttered and thanked him. But suddenly, the young man added that of course, he couldn't even compare her with Sharon. Valerian decided that he started all this only to praise his younger sister again. Therefore, she replied with disappointment that she knew this very well, but she would still take it into account, after which she immediately went to the carriage and told her maid that it was time for them to leave. On the way, the maid suggested that he liked her, but our heroine told her not to talk nonsense. Daisy objected that from the outside, it looked like they had become friends. Dianta replied that she was simply close friends with his sister, so the young man was trying to behave politely. And besides, this knight had come from the north on the orders of Duke Raffaello. Therefore, it is natural that he will be attentive to all of Sharon's surroundings, and most importantly, she is after all Mr. Haint's sister. The maid exclaimed that this guy was quite dangerous, so it was necessary to be careful with him. Meanwhile, the Duchess asked if they were sure they had not spoken about anything special with her. The guy replied that he had simply loaded her things into the carriage. That was all. If he had made some mistake in his behavior, he would ask for forgiveness. The girl replied that no, she had probably misunderstood when she was watching through the window. Sharon added that from a distance, it looked like he was attacking Dianta, and she ran away in fear. Ebek replied that he couldn't say she was wrong. The young man explained that the Duke was very worried that she was too trusting. He said that he did not have time to teach her how to understand people before leaving. But it seems to him that there is no need to worry about this. The sister immediately exclaimed that this is exactly why she likes Duke Valerian. But the guy interrupted her and said that he is not sure about him yet. The lady immediately became upset, and the maid said that she was expected in the dressing room. When the younger one left, the boy thought that she had really run away from fright. He could not say that he was pleased to see how Dianta was trying to avoid his presence by getting into the carriage. For the first time in his life, the young man tried to give a compliment to please someone else, but her eyes still seemed to be looking for somewhere to hide. She sighed deeply before each word, and it was clear that she did not trust him. As soon as he remembered her appearance, his insides were turned over with feelings unfamiliar to him. He feels unpleasant, but the Duke is not angry. On the contrary, thoughts creep into his head about what kind of trap to set for her next time. But at the same time, he does not want to use cruel measures as he did in the north during hunting. It sometimes happens that wounds remain on the prey, but if he had not tried, he would not have risen so high. If he could get a little closer to her, then he would be able to hold her hand much longer. 3 days later, the day of celebration arrived at the imperial palace. Mom said, just in case that if Dianta spends the night away from home again, she will be very angry. Our heroine replied that this will not happen. The father warned his elder brother to be careful at the ball, since he was the heir of their family. His son begged him so much that they haven't made it official yet, because he doesn't want to say what he really thinks about breaking off his engagement with Lady Raffaello. When the young man replied that he would not do so under any circumstances, the man added that, well, then let him make every effort to show himself from a good side at the ball. If bad rumors start to circulate about him again as the head of the clan, he will have to reconsider his decision. Then the parents went to the carriage, and Mom said that they would go to the palace first. Dianta replied that they would pick up Sharon and also join them at the celebration. On the way, she thought about how she understood her brother's sadness very well. Lately, because of him, the entire empire was on its ears. Although the engagement ended well, there was one nuance. All the newspapers wrote that the main heroes of the celebration hardly showed up the whole evening, and at the end, a lady appeared with a tear-stained face. What happened between the young people? Because of this, rumors began to spread that in their family, it was customary to force the daughter-in-law to work. When they arrived at the place, the girl told her brother to go for his beloved, and she would wait for him in the carriage. Our heroine sat waiting for the young man to return with his bride, but they were gone for a long time. In their place appeared a weakened duke who urgently needed help. At first, the girl thought that perhaps they were on a date or that there had been another skirmish with the duke. When she felt a little stuffy, she opened the window to let in some fresh air, but a very strong wind blew. Our heroine was angry that if her hairstyle got ruined again, she would have to spend several hours on it again. Suddenly, the Duke knocked on the window and asked if he could come in to see her. Valerian immediately noticed that there was something wrong with the color of his face and that he looked unwell. Our heroine immediately asked how he felt and if everything was okay. The young man said that he was at his limit and asked her if she had ever met an alchemist. The girl answered that no, because due to preparations for the ball, she had absolutely no time. He said that he did not have enough information for experiments, so she was going to visit him after the ball. The young man muttered that she had no crystals and began to lose his balance. Dianta became very nervous and exclaimed that it was necessary to send a man to Fernando. The guy said that there was a crystal in his inside pocket. He wanted her to take it out herself. As Valerian unbuttoned his clothes, she thought that she had found herself in a very strange situation. Eberg pulled her closer to him and said that when she pulled out the crystal, she would still have to touch it. Dianta thought to herself that there was no other choice, but he was so close that she could feel his breath. When the girl finally got the crystal out and they both held it, the guy asked if it was hard for her. She answered no. She was just surprised that it was so cold, nothing could be done. The difference in temperature between them was very big. Our heroine asked him in response whether it was hard for him to touch such a hot hand. But the young man replied that no. On the contrary, he felt very warm. After which, the young man added that on the contrary, he really didn't want to let go of her hand. Meanwhile, Haint and Sharon were heading towards the carriage, the latter saying that he was still her brother, and she really hoped that they would become friends. As soon as the boys heard the voices, the guy lifted her up and placed her next to him, after which the young man put his index finger to his lips, as if showing that he should remain silent about this. Our heroine supported him and thought that it was unknown what they could hear from these two, so let it be a secret. Then the young man suddenly opened the carriage doors and hit Dianta's older brother right in the face. The Duke immediately said that he did not even notice how Haint came close to the carriage. He was such an inconspicuous person. The young man's expression immediately changed, and he muttered his words about being inconspicuous. Raffaello immediately exclaimed that since they were going to the celebration together today, they needed to do without hostility. When Eberg said that he would go and fetch his horse, Sharon objected that it was not necessary. It would be better for everyone to go together in one carriage. It was in this way that the four of them went to the ball, and the friend exclaimed that she had not gone with Valerian for a long time. The young people seemed to have agreed and looked out the window in silence the whole way. The atmosphere was simply terrible all the way to the imperial palace. Upon arrival, Raffaello stated that since there were four of them, they could all enter together, or she would go first with the knight. The young man objected that no, if she went accompanied by another man, then unpleasant rumors might spread. He would go with Lady Dianta separately from them, after which he asked our heroine whether she would be pleased to enter with him for the sake of Lady Sharon. Our heroine replied that since he insisted so much, then of course since there was no other choice. It naturally happened that at the ball, Dianta became the Duke's partner. The imperial palace was in all its splendor as it should be. The girl was very glad that she finally got out of this carriage, where it was unbearable to ride. But there was one thing. All the aristocrats present were whispering about the article in the newspaper they were discussing, that the guys had a fight right at the engagement party, or that she had to wipe away tears because of the strict morals of her in-laws. The times of the Valerian couple, who were considered outstanding representatives of the family, were over. Our heroine felt out of place, and she wanted to hide somewhere as quickly as possible, after which she thought that if they continued to crowd around in fours, they would attract unnecessary attention, so it would be better to split up. Then she saw the elder brother approach his beloved and ask if she would do him the honor of dancing the first dance. Raffaello smiled sweetly and replied that she would be very happy to. Then the young man glared at the youth and declared that he had won. Dianta thought to herself, "He's a little kid who does Haint even want to hurt with such stupid antics." When the Duke began to head in their direction, our heroine ran after him and shouted after him for him to wait 1 second. Eberk asked in surprise what happened. The girl in response asked if he was really going to leave his partner alone, after which she whispered in his ear that suddenly, tomorrow they would start whispering that his friend had taken her partner away from him at the ball. She could already see it right in the newspaper headlines. And Sharon might be considered a loose woman who can't make up her mind. The guy objected that he didn't think that could happen if he only came for a short time. Valerian replied that the guy doesn't even realize how scary rumors about couples showing up at celebrations together can be. The young man replied that good, then it was necessary to make efforts together so that false rumors were not spread about her. When they came to the center of the hall, Dianta asked if such behavior would be too provocative. Eberg replied that if he never danced with a partner at the ball, then that would also look strange. If she doesn't want to leave him with nothing, then let him come a little closer. Valerian looked at him and thought about what was hidden in those gray eyes, judging by his attitude towards his sister. His sacrifice and unconditional love, everything immediately becomes clear. The guy also has feelings, but he tries to suppress them in relation to one single person, considering it his weak spot. Suddenly, the young man asked why she was looking at him like that. The girl asked how exactly. When the guy replied that it was as if he saw a poor puppy in front of him, the girl objected that he did not look charming. Suddenly, there was a loud cry for everyone to bow their heads as the great son of the Bastia Empire. His Majesty the Emperor and Princess Deborah Francis had arrived. This was the very appearance of the main villain of the work in the book. She was even called a future tyrant. Her words were sharp as daggers. In the novel, there is a description that 10 years later, because of the rebels, she turned into dew at the place of execution. But whatever she was, the girl still remained a direct heir who had received the special skills of a member of the imperial family. It is said that the first emperor had the ability to control people, but as time went by, generations changed, and this ability became weaker and weaker until Deborah was born. Moreover, she was the daughter of the late empress. The image of a princess sitting at the feet of the emperor near his throne is imprinted in the minds of the people. It was suddenly announced that His Highness Prince Livios Principe Basto had arrived. This young man was the half-brother of Francis. He did not possess any outstanding abilities, but many praised him. When there is someone to compare with, the atrocities are even more noticeable. The emperor said that he was very glad that so many people had gathered to congratulate his beloved daughter on her coming of age, after which he announced that they had prepared refreshments for everyone, and he very much hoped that everyone present would have a fun time. After the congratulatory speeches, the princess was immediately surrounded by representatives of aristocratic families. At the same time, there was practically no one around the prince for fear of angering Deborah. Sharon at this time was thinking that there were so many people around her that she couldn't get close, but she invited her in order to make peace. In her imagination, the princess called the girl precisely to offer friendship. Raffaello asked that maybe they should also say hello to the princess, but our heroine said that it would be better to wait a little when there were fewer people. In the meantime, it is better to separate the young people so that they do not quarrel completely. The Duchess immediately flew up to Haint and exclaimed that she had asked him not to quarrel. Dianta thought to herself that her brother would have to sweat a little. In vain he began to tease the Duke, because she was very uncomfortable. She could not be the only one suffering. Suddenly, the prince's voice was heard from behind, who turned to Sharon. The young man said that he looked at her from afar, but did not think that she was really the Duchess. They met several times at balls before the Duke went north. It seems they had not seen each other for almost 4 years. From the newspapers, he learned that the girl was engaged, after which he asked whether this gentleman, who was next to her, was her fiancé. It seems he was the eldest son of the Marquis Valerian. Livios has heard a lot about him. They say that the guy is very capable and does a lot for the empire, working in places where help is needed. The young man replied that he still had a lot to learn, but our heroine thought to herself that even though he looked simple, a prince was still a prince, but he looked like a simple, nice guy from the universities. The boy then turned to the girl and noted that she seemed to be Lady Valerian, after which he switched to the Duke and asked who was this gentleman who was next to her. Eberk bowed and said that it was a great honor for him to meet His Highness, then introduced himself and added that his name was Natan Diego. Our heroine immediately intervened in the conversation and said that this guy had come here as her partner. The knight came from the northern lands, so he really likes to look at everything, but she thought to herself that it would be better to distract his attention by pretending to be a lady who wants to arouse his interest in herself. Therefore, she added that the banquet in the imperial palace was simply top-notch. Everything around was incredibly beautiful. The young man stated that now everything was clear. This young man was her partner. Dianta exhaled that it seemed he did not recognize the Duke. The facial features may be the same, but the hair and eye color are different, and his appearance now does not go with any country, not with what remains in people's memories. The prince continued that it was very annoying, as she could see the young man came to the ball alone and was just looking for a person who could brighten up his evening. If it weren't for this night, he would have offered the charming lady to become his partner for the evening. Our heroine exclaimed that it was a pity if she had known she would have come alone. Levios clarified that perhaps it was not too late. Suddenly, the Duke came up close to her and asked her if she was going to accidentally leave him here alone. His Highness laughed and noted that he seemed to like Dianta, so don't worry, he wouldn't steal his partner. The young man replied with sarcasm in his voice that it was an incredible relief. The prince wished them a good evening and to have a great time at this event. After these words, Principi left their company and gradually disappeared among the invited guests. The elder brother exclaimed that the difference in his voice was immediately audible when he addressed him. The Duchess noted that Valerian and the knight were holding hands. Our heroine immediately became embarrassed and pulled her hand away while the young man asked for forgiveness. The girl replied that it was okay. He probably had a reason he was not the type to just grab a lady by the hand. The Duke replied that if she wanted, he was ready to think of a reason right now. It just seemed to him that if this situation was not put to an end, the prince would not leave just like that, so he had to grab her hand. If this was unpleasant to my lady, then he apologizes. But Dianta exclaimed that everything was fine. After this, there was an awkward silence, and the girl thought to herself that she needed to pretend that she needed to go to the toilet. When our heroine was about to leave, the young man immediately grabbed her by the waist, after which he told her to be careful as she almost fell tripping over the hem of her dress. Valerian thought to herself that this was not true. Then the young man leaned towards her and asked if he could ask her one question, whether she really intended to go with him. But the girl did not have time to answer, as the princess called her by name. Our heroine noted that all the guests parted like the Black Sea as the real villain of the novel appeared. The young man had an expression on his face, as if he was shocked by this appearance. Although if you think about it, you can understand him. The Duke always wrote in his letters that he was doing well, and the younger sister also tried to write to her brother only about good things. She is also angry about this situation, but if the Duke interferes now, he will only harm his sister. Deborah said that she heard that the guys broke off their engagement, but they still came to her ball together. Apparently, they value each other very much. Haint asked Her Highness to allow him to say a few words. In fact, no one broke off the engagement, but the princess interrupted him and ordered him to be silent, after which she added that she was not addressing Sir Valerian. Both brother and sister are birds of a feather in childhood. She saw the Duke, albeit briefly, and he is a real scoundrel. Sharon did not expect to be treated like that, so she felt very unpleasant. The boy behaved so insolently towards the Emperor, who had only good intentions. Is the Duke doing well in the north? They say that he is called a monster. It seems that his terrible character remained the same. There was no news about him, and then only rumors about such a nickname reached us. But that was obvious, wasn't it? Because of his bad character and stubbornness, his subordinates suffer. Our heroine noted to herself that of course her behavior angers her a little, but the princess is partly right. Dianta mentally asked Sharon to be patient if she began to show hostility because of the character of Her Highness. Then the purpose of attending this ball was doomed. One movement of her fingers, and she might never see her older brother again. So precarious was the position of the Raffaello family during Eberk's absence. When Valerian called out to Deborah, the girl said that if she had anything to say, she should try. Our heroine thought to herself that such behavior of the princess did not mean Sharon's defeat. Suddenly, the Duchess declared that as a lady she understood her perfectly. Probably Frances simply hated her brother because he had rejected her proposal of marriage so many times. But this was not at all due to a lack of charm in hers. Her Highness was taken aback by what she heard and exclaimed what she had just said. The Duchess continued that Deborah simply did not quite suit his tastes, and she begged her not to be angry with him for this. If she looks at her face for so long, which reminds her of the Duke, then her mood will be spoiled, and the girl cannot spoil her holiday because today she is the main character, so it is time for her to go. His eyes were full of mixed feelings. It seemed like he was ready to break everything. You could clearly see all these emotions associated with Sharon. His reaction is natural and understandable. Therefore, the girl said that it would be better for the young man to go after her, and it was time for her to return home. It was strange to watch the girl go, as she had forgotten about her, and simply left it, felt as if the closest person had abandoned her. Dianta should have consoled the crying Deborah. She could have asked why she was crying over such a small thing, but her behavior could be a turning point. Initially, the princess bullied Sharon because of her resentment towards her older brother. But after today's conflict, the girl began to hate the Duchess herself. If this continues, this Cold War may affect her too. Let her friend forgive her, because she is not going to betray her. She just wants someone to leave a good impression of her. Only in this way, no one will get hurt, and they will get closer to a happy ending. Deborah exclaimed, "How did Deonta know where she was?" Deborah heard that they were close friends with Sharon. Did she come to sort things out? Our heroine laughed and thanked him for the compliment. But Her Highness objected that it was not a compliment. Valerian said she thinks it's a compliment. Impudence is when a person doesn't care what others think of him, and also the ability to not get upset, even if he made a mistake or something didn't work out for him. Her Highness muttered in confusion that she was indeed very impudent. When our heroine laughed loudly, the princess asked what made her laugh so much. Then Valerian came to her senses and thought that this was already a bit too much. It was necessary to turn on the mind. After which, she immediately asked for forgiveness if she had blurted out something unnecessary. But Her Highness replied that everything was fine. Then she added that she had never met people who treated her like that. But that was okay. Then, Her Highness stood up and announced that it was time for her to go, as everyone was probably waiting, and Deonta shouted after her to ignore the people around her, to act confidently, and enjoy the day. Coming of age only happens once in a lifetime, and she has every right to it, after which she added that she once again congratulates her on her birthday. The girl really hopes that the princess is okay, and that she returned to the ball. After their meeting, she immediately went home, so she couldn't check. The book described how she felt ashamed for running away, which she later regretted. Deonta decided it was a ghost, so she grabbed the candlestick and screamed loudly for it to go away. But when she opened her eyes, she saw a young man who asked her if she was really scared. The girl exclaimed that of course she was. The young man replied that he had climbed over the fence several times along the way and broken the spells. It wasn't that difficult, and he thought that she should strengthen her security. According to the books, they were able to split mountains and seas in half with one swing of their sword, as well as destroy magic spells. As the girl expected, the main character of this era was Eberk. Then she asked if he had seen Sharon. The guy replied that there was no time for that, since her brother very quickly took his sister into the room. She also said that she did not want to talk to anyone today, and asked not to disturb her. Deonta thought to herself that he probably felt guilty for not being able to stay with the younger one. Our heroine told him not to think like that when the young man asked what she thought he was thinking. Valerian replied that whatever it was, let him not think like that. The young man made the best choice at that moment, thanks to which Sharon was safe. This is the purest truth, so she respects him, and is very grateful for the decision he made, after which she added that the Duchess certainly thinks so too. She was panicking inside, but she decided that she couldn't show it and needed to say something. The guy replied that he was worried about whether she got to the estate safely. Deonta noted to herself that he began to move away, apparently realizing that she was scared. The guy added that he couldn't see her off, that's why he came. And besides, he didn't tell her the most important thing. The girl exclaimed that it was probably about his illness exactly. It was necessary to agree on all the details in advance. It would be more convenient. When there was a heavy pause, Valerian asked if she had said something wrong, but the young man replied that this was also not bad. He hoped that she had not forgotten about him while she was busy preparing for the ball. The girl replied that no. As she had already told him earlier, she asked Fernando to get information about the magic poisoning. She would have to visit him again. The knight asked when she planned to visit him he would like to go with her. Deonta replied that tomorrow she had agreed to meet with Sharon and would also visit the alchemist every time something unpleasant happens to her the next day. They usually spend time together. The young man muttered thoughtfully, which meant that she wouldn't be able to leave alone unnoticed. The girl replied that it was okay, she would do it when it was time to say goodbye, and ask her brother to see Raffaello off. The young man's expression immediately changed, and he asked if she meant hate Valerian. The guy added that her brother is also a direct heir, so he should not be a fickle person. Perhaps he can be trusted to accompany Sharon. It is necessary to send the Duke home quickly and teach his brother how to behave. So she exclaimed that he should be careful and all the best exit to the terrace. Noticing that the young man did not take his eyes off her, the girl wondered what kind of strange reaction this was. maybe it was too rude to ask him to leave the terrace. The girl replied that no, it was late, so she was worried about him. At first, our heroine did not understand what he was talking about, but then it dawned on her that he meant the prince. Dianta asked if she made any mistake, since she was very afraid that he would be exposed. She does not remember the details of that situation well. Then she grabbed her head and asked to give her time to remember. But the knight said that it was not worth bothering herself with this. Looking after him, our heroine wondered whether he had really come in the middle of the night, just to ask this. Let the man find out all the details about Natan Diego, who he is and what he is like. The guy thought it was an ordinary ball until he met a bright girl with red hair. Her behavior was different from other ladies. No matter how tenderly he looked at her, she did not react to it. On the contrary, Dianta spoke directly and even a little cunningly, as if she knew that it was all false. But in fact, most people do not distinguish between straightforwardness and goodwill. But what worried him most was Natan Diego on the one hand. He is very similar to Duke Raffaello, with whom the emperor dreamed of connecting Deborah. But on the other hand, he is not. The young man had already thought that they were simply very similar, but that look could not be confused with anyone else's. The guy clearly wants to get her. If he is not a duke, then this will be a great relief. But if the prince is right, this will also only play into his hands. The next morning, the girl thought that it was good that her parents didn't say anything about yesterday's incident. Apparently, they didn't want to upset themselves any further. The father asked if this was necessary, since there was already a beautiful flower in front of him. Our heroine stated that they found another way to spoil their mood. The man continued to say that he still could not believe how such a charming maiden became his wife. Will she really become like that too? Will she lay her head on her beloved's shoulder and talk to him? Will she hold his hand, joke about him, and laugh? Then she will raise her head and look into the beautiful gray eyes of her lover. Our heroine suddenly came to her senses and thought that she had gone crazy. Why did she suddenly introduce the Duke? When the girl came to her senses a little, she saw the stunned faces of her parents and the maid. She doesn't plan to date anyone yet. She's just thinking about it for some reason. The parents pretended to be worried about her for a short time and then turned their attention back to each other. Before meeting Sharon, she needs to go to Fernando because of the dress she was going to ride in the mail coach, since there are robbers everywhere. Suddenly, a young man's voice was heard saying that she was late. When the Duke's true form appeared in her imagination again, Dianta decided that she needed to take him into her own hands because he was the brother of the main character, her future daughter-in-law. The young man came closer and asked what she was doing, and the girl began to think that he could actually be considered her relative. And had she really gone crazy? The guy added that he had asked her not to avoid him. Was she really that afraid? Dianta thought to herself that he was just so handsome that she immediately had indecent thoughts in her head, so she avoided, but she couldn't say all this to his face. The Duke said that if she did not want to talk, then there was no need, and gave her a note saying that in 3 hours, Sharon would be waiting for her near the largest tree. Our heroine stated that it meant he had come to convey this message. But when Iberk put her on the horse and they set off, Valerian realized that no. On the way, the girl wondered why he had such a strong chest and strong arms. Suddenly, the Duke pulled her closer to him and said that if she continued to fidget like that, she might fall off her horse. Our heroine shuddered and suddenly lost her balance, after which she began to fall down. But at the last moment, the young man managed to catch her and sit her back down. The Duke muttered that she wasn't so uncomfortable that she was ready to fall, but then added that, well, it didn't matter. Then he got off his horse and said that there was only one, so he would give it to her, and he himself would try not to be late, and would follow the girl. While Dianta was riding her horse, she did not see Eberk. Perhaps he deliberately took a detour. They had almost finished talking with Fernando, but the Duke was still nowhere to be seen. However, after some time, the young man finally appeared. Our heroine was very happy and turned to him so that he would listen to her. But the young man simply ignored her and told the alchemist that he had one question for him. The girl thought to herself that this was a very strange feeling, because he had never ignored or avoided her, unlike herself. It felt like a ladle of ice water had been dumped on her. Valerian then heard him ask how much the energy charging time could be extended. The alchemist replied that with the first prototype of the medicine for about 4 days, only this time he plans to give him a new combination of drugs, so he can't say for sure. The young man concluded that it turned out that there was no way to use sedatives on his own without the help of Lady Dianta. Fernando replied that he had been able to control his attacks very well. Thanks to her, was there any point in resorting to dubious methods? He needed to take samples from him, and he should not expose himself to danger under any circumstances. Let the guy not forget that he is his only experimental subject that is a patient. After which the alchemist exclaimed that first, he would go and bring the ready-made crystals. The girl thought about the fact that for a whole month he had been pestering her with a request to see her, so why now did he want to extend the duration of the medicine? Then our heroine began to try to shout to the young man, but he continued to ignore her. But then the young man could not stand it, and asked if his touches were really so unpleasant to hers. Dianta thought to herself that she didn't feel uncomfortable. On the contrary, there was a feeling of coolness if it were some object, then she would want to continue holding it in her hands. But the more the Duke touches her, the more he makes her heart clench. Ebert got mad and said that her long silence speaks for itself, so there is no need to voice the answer. The girl thought that she simply wanted to talk about her feelings, and that she did not understand herself, but she said out loud that this was not the case at all. The guy ignored it and said that in the future, he would be careful not to touch her unnecessarily if it was unpleasant, but she was afraid to say so let her forgive him for everything. Our heroine began to reach for his hand and ask why he suddenly began to apologize, but the young man abruptly moved away from her and replied that he was thinking only about himself and his feelings, and because of this trouble, almost happened today. Therefore, Dianta has no need to force himself to touch it. After some time, Sharon exclaimed that her friend had finally arrived, and with Sir Diego, the elder brother muttered that she was talking about having things to do. But was she really talking about this guy? The sister replied that they had crossed paths by chance. The Duke confirmed this, and added that they had met by chance on the road. He was late because he was looking for a suitable umbrella for the lady. The sun is too bright during the day, so it is better to use this one. Our heroine noted to herself that he was so smart because this was an excellent excuse. When Dianta asked where she and Raffaello would go, the Duchess said that they had 2 horses, so they could go somewhere they had not been together. The girl immediately remembered Fernando's words, that they must definitely return the horse, because for them it was just an animal, but for him it was a treasure. When Haynes said that he would go with Sharon, the Duke objected and said that he would go with the lady. The elder brother replied that this was impossible. Why, if her fiancé was present? Iberk exclaimed that he did not want the knight to ride with Lady Valerian. In that case, bad rumors might start to spread about her. Our heroine noted to herself that he himself had only recently not even thought about rumors and was trying to grab her hand. Dianta thought they were getting a little closer, but the guy is trying to distance himself from her. Sharon resolved this conflict situation by going on a horse ride with her friend to a beautiful place together. The girl said that it seemed like there was a sunset hill there. Now it was clear why it was called that. Raffaello answered that it was true she often visited there as a child, so she always wanted to come with people dear to her heart. Suddenly, Haynes' voice was heard saying that they would now come there often. But my beloved suggested coming in the same group as today, the 4 of us. When the Duke said that they could get off their horse, the boy exclaimed that he was going to. Anyway, people had been staring at them the whole way. Sharon said not to worry because they look great together. It looks like the guys are best friends. After some time, Dianta noted to herself that as always, she was responsible for arranging the food on the blanket. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, and the blanket began to cover a piece of cake. But a young man arrived in time and immediately stopped him. Our heroine placed her hand on his and thanked him with all her heart. And then she quickly rattled off that it would probably be better to prepare and start on dessert. After some time, Dianta noted that it took longer than she thought, and all because of this couple who did absolutely nothing. As for the Duke, she felt how he wanted to rush towards them to separate them, but did not dare to come closer, although he was standing only a step away from them, as if he was afraid to spoil this beautiful view. Valerian, this situation was already starting to get very annoying, because how much can you do? He himself told her not to come near him anymore, and now he stands aside so sad. But if you think about it, Dianta also gave Haint and Sharon a lot of advice at one time, and then just watched from the sidelines. Our heroine has endured everything for too long, and the blood of her dynasty has not boiled in her for a long time. Among the many rumors in high society, There are these words: "Do not wake the sleeping Valerian, all because their clan was known for its hot temper." Then she approached the young man and tried in every way to attract his attention, but he seemed not to notice her. Unable to bear it, the girl exclaimed that he could have given in to her, but she thought to herself that she was one of those who lacked patience, even though she had made a firm decision. But the Duke had been running away from her for minutes straight, after which she asked for forgiveness and said that she was wrong. The young man asked why she was suddenly saying this. She had nothing to apologize to him for, but Dianta objected that she had too. Our heroine was very nervous, so she tried to avoid him because he is very attractive, and when a handsome man constantly approaches her, she feels awkward. Noticing his barely noticeable smile, Valerian realized that it was a great relief because it seemed that he had become a little more cheerful. But then she added that she naturally does not perceive him as a man, but still, when it comes to the opposite sex, it is not surprising that she is embarrassed if he comes close to hers. She thought to herself that of course it happens that she has some vague feelings for him, but there was one problem that compensated for this moment. Namely, the fact that her brother and his sister were engaged. This is not particularly welcomed in aristocratic society. After all, marriage is considered a means of establishing new connections with other clans in order to increase one's power. So double matchmakers were perceived as something like a merger and acquisition of a company. Therefore, he probably doesn't want to get involved with her. The guy asked if she was serious about not perceiving him as a man. Dianta exclaimed that it was true. In turn, she will also try not to give cause for misunderstandings. She realized how hard it is when you are avoided, even if there were no bad intentions. It is very exhausting and does not give peace. The girl promises not to follow him around anymore, so he shouldn't run away from her either. Then she suggested promising that they wouldn't avoid each other. Iberk replied that this time he didn't force her. She suggested it herself. The girl said that it was all a misunderstanding and asked him not to avoid her. He would make sure that she remembered these words. Our heroine noted that it seemed she had dug her own grave, so she exclaimed that so much time had passed, and it was getting dark. They probably talked too long, lest Sharon think something strange. The Duke asked why she shouldn't think that way. Dianta replied, because she might worry that they were having a very serious conversation. Then they saw Raffaello, who was standing near the tree, and said that she had simply called them, but they still did not go down the hill, so she came for them herself. Sometime later, the girl asked if Sharon wanted to tell her something, but her friend replied that she did not. Valerian thought to herself that she kept looking at her, then at Eberk, and then at Haint, as if she was about to burst into tears. And then again, she was thinking about something. The Duke handed her a cookie and told her to help herself. There were his favorite raisins inside. The young man immediately butted in and asked what he was offering. The girl raisins are also called demon nipples. What kind of low-grade food is this? Our heroine immediately asked what they had done. Were the guys in a kindergarten or what? Then Sharon called her and asked if they could talk alone. When they had stepped aside, the girl said that she would like to tell her something about Sir Diego. She thought for a long time whether to tell her or not, but since they were all there together, she decided that she definitely had to tell him today. Our heroine wondered what terrible thing she wanted to tell about the young man. Sharon added that she knew it would sound unexpected, but she wanted to say that Sir Diego was actually her brother. When Dianta breathed a sigh of relief, her friend asked her if she was upset Raffaello didn't tell her the truth, not because she didn't trust her. Valerian took her hands and replied that everything was fine. To be honest, she knew it from the very beginning. When she first met him, she accidentally saw him without a wig, and she thought to herself that he asked her not to tell others about his illness, but did not say anything about not revealing his identity. Even if the guy had changed a lot, it was hard not to recognize him as the image from the pictures she saw in her house. She hadn't talked about it all along because a lot had happened lately anyway, and she was still waiting for the moment when her friend would decide to tell her. Sharon asked if she could continue to address him as a knight, and not as her brother. The girl believes that the young man should calm down when he sees how she lives. Raffaello herself wants to do everything in her power for him, so she asks her to have fun together today. After some time near the palace, Haint stated that this was a terrible fellow traveler. Iberg stated that he completely agreed with him, so he is the first to leave. Sharon asked if she noticed that the relationship between them had not improved. Dianta replied that they would rather fight than become friends naturally if the brother finds out who Diego really is. Then it will be a different story. The girl replied that it wouldn't come to that. But Haint shouldn't be trusted with such secrets. She wanted to try to make them friends by force. Our heroine thought to herself that if they continue to treat each other like this, their relationship will completely deteriorate, and this is fraught with consequences. To prevent such a situation, it is necessary to sort things out from one side. After which, she told her friend that it was time for her and her older brother to go home. The young man began to smile affably and shout out the name of his beloved, so that she would pay attention to him and they would say goodbye. But his sister stopped him and said that he was always saying that he needed to say goodbye to his fiancée, but he was making her wait because he was chatting with her for at least another 2 hours. After which, she told him to wait a little near the horse, and the guy was indignant that where had he ever seen someone treat older brothers like that. Suddenly, the Duke asked what he and Raffaello had talked about on the hill. Our heroine replied that she apologized for deceiving her and told him that he was her brother. The guy said that it must have been hard on her soul when Sharon said all this. The conversation could have carried her away, so he would ask directly if she had accidentally let it slip to her about his illness. Dianta replied that she hadn't told her anything, perhaps she would be offended by her later, but Valerian agreed with his opinion. She couldn't let her friend spend this month while he was here in tears. On the other hand, our heroine does not intend to continue to deceive her, but simply agrees with his decision. However, for her, her friend comes first, but she also has her limits. After which, she added that she would save him no matter what it cost her, and until the healing occurred, she would keep his secret a secret. The young man began to smile and asked again what he meant by, "He will save him no matter what." The girl felt very awkward, and the guy decided that she was making fun of him. Then the girl exclaimed that since she had already answered all the questions that interested him, it was time for her to go. Suddenly, the young man grabbed her hand and, looking into her eyes, said that then he would trust her and wait. When the young man looked up, he saw his younger sister standing on the balcony. Sharon couldn't believe that there was something between her brother, who hated being touched, and Dianta. It was very interesting what was really going on between them. The next day, her brother asked her what she had talked about with that night. She told him that she wanted to say goodbye, but she herself was whispering to him about something. The girl exclaimed that since when had he been so interested in her affairs? What was wrong with him? The young man asked what kind of strange reaction this was. Did she really like him, if anything? Then Haint was against such a union only over his dead body. Our heroine answered whether he himself even understands that his words and thoughts are absurd. She simply said goodbye to Sir Diego, and nothing more. The guy muttered that it was good. Goodbye was goodbye. Why be so angry? Valerian screamed because he followed her like a dog and pestered her with his stupid questions. Haint exclaimed, "What other dog? How is she even talking to her brother?" The girl objected, "Why is he tormenting his only sister since the morning?" After some time, a maid came running to our heroine in a hurry and said that she had received a letter from the imperial palace sent by the prince. It was said there that their conversation was imprinted on his memory, from which he received pleasure, but he happened to hear from his sister that she left the ball early. If the girl does not mind, he would like to invite Dianta, her partner also, Lady Raffaello, to the palace tomorrow. He will send a servant to them. Our heroine noted to herself that he was pretending to ask for her consent, but he himself wanted her to obey his words. It is immediately obvious that he is a cunning and sly member of the imperial family. He looks so cute, but he is a real raccoon. After which, she told the maid to bring a cape, since she remembered that she had personal business. The red brick house looked ordinary from the outside, but the place was known to a small circle of people, a cheap tavern for workers, and an inn for travelers. One of the guests said that he heard from a friend who works in the imperial palace that the princess ran out of the hall right in the middle of the ball, yelling at the maids. After all, Prince Livios should become the ruler. Dianta found Noel Wood there, who was her friend, and also the owner of this nameless hotel. He is also the head of the most famous information guild in the empire, called the Owl, which did not fit with his modest appearance. Earlier, the girl read in the newspaper that while she was unconscious, a gold mine was discovered in the west. If she had remembered this earlier, she would have bought that land. Then it dawned on her that if she used it correctly, she would be able to help her older brother later, and she felt sorry that she was not using the information she had. Recently, there have been rumors that the Information Guild is inciting people to revolt. In the novel, it was said that the Imperial Palace declared persecution against this group. But Noel, who was the leader, was from an aristocratic family, so he was one of the first to know about it. In order to befriend him, the girl used the fact that she had moved into someone else's body several times, sold him some information circulating among the aristocrats. Thanks to this, the guild was able to grow faster. When they went into another room, our heroine asked if there was anyone there, because all the workers are members of the guild, so they are always ready to collect information. The young man replied that of course not. She could be calm because they were alone. The guy just wanted to talk to her. It was good that she came herself. His people say that lately they often see her in the alley, not far from the laboratory of that mad alchemist who studies the northern lands. Wood doesn't think she shows up there without a specific purpose. Dianta noted to herself that she still couldn't fool him, although she was still going to pass the information on to him when the cure finally appeared. Then she answered that she was collecting something about the northern lands. There was no exact answer yet, but as soon as everything was ready, she would tell him. The guy asked if it was connected with Raffaello Vellerin, answered that it was a little. The young man exclaimed that he knew it. She starts to fuss only when it comes to her brother and Sharon constantly asking to tell gossip and rumors. Dianta thought to herself that maybe the prince really did invite them because he felt guilty, but that was if it was about hate. Or more precisely then, he had no benefit from her. Despite all this, he invited only her Sharon and the Duke. Something is clearly wrong here. Then she turned to the young man and asked him to tell her about Prince Livios. The next day, His Highness sent a golden carriage from his servant. Looking around, our heroine noted that all the statues in the world were gathered around the prince's relatives. On his mother's side were a famous trading guild, after all, not simple people. Suddenly, the girl heard someone call her by name and did not understand who else was there. Then a young man appeared, and Dianta asked in surprise how he found her at all. The guy explained that when he arrived, he noticed her entering this part of the garden. Judging by the fact that the lady was walking towards the dead end, he assumed that Valerian was lost, which is why he followed her. Our heroine thanked him for his concern and asked where Sharon was. Weren't they together? The young man replied that his sister was walking in the garden. There was no need to worry about her. The girl objected that he had come with her. Was it any harm that Iberk was now with her? The young man replied that it was nothing. The Duchess, on the contrary, was the first to suggest that he follow her when she saw that she was heading towards a dead end. Dianta asked if something was wrong with Sharon, because she felt that something was bothering him. The young man explained that he simply suddenly realized that his sister was older than he thought. He was unhappy that time was passing so quickly, and besides, the reason was not Raffaello, but something else. When the Duke took her hand, Valerian asked why he suddenly needed her. Iberk replied that this way he would not lose the crystals since 2 whole days had already passed. After these words, the young man barely managed to hold back his smile. After some time, the prince greeted the boys and told them which side Lady Valerian should sit on. Our heroine noted to herself that he wanted her to sit next to him, and she already thanked him out loud. The young man smiled affably and replied that there was no reason to. These were generally accepted measures. And to prevent a repeat of what happened last time when animals came into the dining room, he put them in a cage in advance, so there was no need to worry. Then he turned to Lady Raffaello and said that he had heard that, at the ball, his sister had behaved rudely to her. The Duchess smiled and replied that there was no need to worry. Everything was perfectly fine. But the guy objected that as an older brother, he would certainly like to apologize instead of her. Dianta noted to herself that it seemed that the princess was not even listening to him. Instead, Deborah tries to catch her eye, maybe because she saw her crying. His Highness turned to his sister and said that she needed to apologize for her actions. The girl collected her thoughts and apologized for that evening. But as soon as she remembers what people were whispering about, then she feels uneasy. Lady Raffaello replied that it was okay. She had already forgotten and forgiven everything. After this, there was a deathly silence in the room. It was obvious that the princess felt uncomfortable. Then Livios turned to Sir Diego and said that he had heard that he was staying at Raffaello's estate. The young man replied that yes, he was temporarily enjoying their hospitality, But had he told His Highness about this? The guy replied that Natan had not personally reported this to him, but he was a fairly well-known knight in the north, and he had heard about it from his friends. Our heroine noted to herself that the prince was brazenly lying. He could not have heard anything like that about him. Immediately after her request, Noel sent a man to find out about the prince. He received the information through a man from Livio's entourage, whom he bribed. The man said that he was given the task to find out everything about Natan Diego. He then added that however he was at the banquet with Dianta, does this mean that there is a close relationship between two lovers between them? The girl did not expect such a question, and did not understand why he decided to drag her into it. Valerian immediately objected that they did not have that kind of relationship at all. She did not have a partner, so Diego agreed to help her. That's all. His Highness came up close to her and asked if she really had no acquaintances at all. Our heroine wondered if he couldn't find the information, so now he's trying to check it. Noel said that he also checked Sir Diego, but he couldn't really find out anything, since Natan was an orphan from a ruined aristocratic family. The only thing he learned was that the boy lost his parents early, and that he moved north at a young age. Then she replied that she didn't have any acquaintances of that kind, so she asked him. Livios asked if he could ask her a personal question. In that case, the girl replied that of course he could ask, after which His Highness asked if our heroine had a lover. Dianta replied that right now, she is more interested in spending time with her family than thinking about a romantic relationship. The time has not come for that yet. She is also still attracted by the idea of developing her own abilities, but she thought to herself that he is definitely testing her. The prince is known for never being involved in a scandal, so why is he suddenly showing interest in her? The young man asked if she really didn't have time even for him, but then quickly added that it was a joke. The girl thought to herself that in 10 years, Livios would stage a rebellion and take the imperial throne. If she starts a relationship with him, she might get sucked into this political whirlpool. If he has sincere sympathy for her, then this may also cause some problems. Then His Highness added that not everything he said was a joke. Our heroine stopped understanding what was happening and what he meant by these words. Noticing that Sir Diego's fork had rust on it, the prince said that he thought that they were looking after it. Usually, when even a small spot of rust appears, the thing immediately goes bad. After which he added that he would like to ask the young man something, whether by any chance he liked Lady Valerian. He still has such a fierce look, probably like many knights. The guy replied that he had been in the north for a long time and had encountered death more than once. Perhaps that was why his look became stern, and if this caused him inconvenience, then he asks for forgiveness. However, if Natan says that he has an interest in the lady, will he take his words back? His Highness looked at him defiantly and replied that of course no. The girls felt all this tension. They felt extremely awkward, but they didn't know what to do. Then the prince laughed and said that there was no need to be so wary of him. Dianta did not understand why he behaved like that. In any case, the knight has demonstrated his attitude, so now we can relax. Now he invites all the guests to move on to the main course. Valerian had no doubt that Livios was using her to test the Duke. After all, the Raffaello he knows would have reacted with complete indifference. He was famous since childhood for his strong character and unapproachability. The Duke, who is not easy to befriend, fell in love at first sight with a lady he did not know well. This would be very unlike him. That is why the prince called her with Sharon in order to see how he would behave. Most likely the Duke immediately guessed about this plan. Otherwise, he would not have reacted so ardently. Remembering what he answered the prince, the girl did not understand why her heart suddenly began to beat so hard, and some unpleasant feeling appeared inside. After the storm had died down, the meal in the imperial palace took place in complete silence. The prince left, first reporting that he had problems in the merchant guild. He helps run the business, which is run by his relatives on his mother's side. After he left, everyone else gradually began to gather. The princess stated that they had already finished their meal, which meant they could go. Already in the carriage, Sharon was indignant that this couldn't be. They had seen what happened at the ball. Our heroine answered that usually there are serious rumors about high-born persons. She could simply feel insecure because of the looks of those around her. The Duchess was indignant that her friend had taken Deborah's side. Aberk thought to himself that the girl's marriage was certainly a demand of the emperor. There is no point in blaming the then very young princess for anything, especially since she also suffered. But the fact that she mocked Sharon is the pure truth. But it cannot be said that she is truly evil. Lady Valerian will certainly behave differently, as she did with him. Seeing her interact with someone else was unpleasant, but he couldn't stop looking at her. Someday, these feelings will turn into his weakness, and they will begin to poison his life. Before they become bitter enemies, he must nip them in the bud. But despite all this, even in his imagination, the guy cannot kill her. Sharon said that when she talked to the princess, she felt like something was being taken away from her. Dianta objected that Her Highness could never take her away from her friend. Eberg continued to think that he couldn't treat her well just because she was his sister's best friend and the person she needed. Since when did he become interested in people for some special reason? The Duchess added that she loved Lady Valerian very much and therefore was jealous when she talked to others. Listening to their conversation, the young man realized what kind of feeling he was experiencing. The event that simply forced him to acknowledge his feelings came much faster than he thought. At the estate a few days before they met, Mother said that since the girl herself had hinted that she was lonely, she didn't have to meet him. Just let her go on this date once. She can't get married without ever knowing what a real date is. Dianta thought to herself that when she was 10 years old, she liked someone. It was some boring ball where adults talked to each other, so they often met with him and played in the garden. The woman continued to persuade her to go. Just once, she had difficulty getting this option from the best matchmaker in the world, Baroness Charity, before marriage. It wouldn't hurt her to communicate with men. The girl found it difficult to withstand her mother's pressure, so she replied that perhaps it really was worth going. The choice of Dianta had great consequences, and news immediately appeared in the newspaper about whether the Baroness had managed to successfully bring together that very same Lady Valerian. After reading this title, the princess was taken aback that the girl was really going on a date. The prince was also surprised and muttered that she had said that she was not interested in a relationship. Raffaello was also shocked because the girl didn't tell them anything about it. Looking at the pile of letters, the maid noted that it seemed that there were rumors about her date. Dianta was indignant why strangers were always getting into someone else's personal life. Noel wrote that he thought that they were friends, but the girl did not say a word about such an event. If the guild had sold this information first, they would have earned tens of gold. He thought that she was not interested in men. Our heroine was very angry and burned the letters because she was irritated by this attitude. But one of the letters was on business from Fernando. The guy wrote that they lacked holy water. The maid immediately asked where she was going to go. They actually had a lot to prepare. The girl replied that she would go out for a short while, but the maid objected that they did not have time since the date was in 2 days. Our heroine tried to object that wasn't that enough. They could do everything tomorrow. Daisy replied that since she was unable to attend the ball, she now had to appear before people in an ideal image. But when the maid turned around, Lady Valerian had already jumped straight out the window and without shoes. As a result, not only the maid, but also her parents tried to catch up with our heroine. After some time, the girl finally managed to break away from them, and she thought that she needed to find the loophole she used in childhood. Suddenly, a voice came from behind, which said that this passage had been sealed up long ago. It was the older brother, who said that he hid it when they grew up, so that they wouldn't be scolded, because they couldn't get in there anyway. Dianta was outraged that he was of absolutely no use, because she could still squeeze through. The guy was outraged at how she was talking to her brother. Valerian replied that there was not that much difference between them. The young man said that he was actually going to cover it up, but apparently he should call people hearies. As soon as the guy was about to shout the word mom, the girl began to persuade him to shut up. But a moment later, Haint fell to the ground, unconscious. The Duke, who had approached unnoticed, simply knocked him out. The girl asked if he had come to see her brother. The boy asked if he looked like a man who had nothing better to do. Dianta asked if he was feeling unwell. She was on her way to see Fernando right now, but they couldn't do the treatment right there. Maybe after she finished her business. The young man asked who she took him for. Our heroine did not understand what the problem was. Did he really want them to start treatment right now? Then she answered that for Duke Raffaello, he is the only relative of her best friend, the one with whom they will soon become related. She thought to herself that why was he just frowning and not saying anything? They needed to leave quickly before people saw them. After which she added that the young man is also someone who values his family very much, and he is also a very handsome man. When she first met him, she was a little scared by his coldness, but now she knows that he is not like that at all. If the guy had officially arrived in the capital, he would have long ago become known as the most handsome man. The young man thinks a lot about his family. He is probably the most caring person she knows. His future wife will surely be very lucky. Suddenly, the young man asked if she was afraid of him. The girl answered that she was no longer afraid. Eberk added that he did not know that she had such an opinion about him, after which the young man suggested starting their acquaintance again from this place. Dianta noted to herself that unlike their first meeting, the Duke was smiling quite a lot, then asked where exactly they should start. The guy replied that he didn't even know what she thought they should start with, after which he drew attention to the fact that Valerian was barefoot. Without thinking twice, the young man picked her up in his arms and told her to hold on tight so as not to fall. After which, he jumped over the fence like some kind of superhero. While the girl was confused, the Duke added that first, she needed to look into a shoe shop. If she walked around like that, she risked catching a cold. How about that shoe store? It looks like there's a lot to choose from. Dianta thought to herself. Let him put her down, she can walk on her own. Then Iberk added that he didn't mind if she wanted him to continue carrying her. Our heroine replied that it was fine, she really liked it. When the guy asked if she meant that he was holding her in his arms, the girl screamed that no, she was talking about how she liked that store. The young man muttered that it was a pity Valerian could not understand when he had become so sly. In the shoe shop, the Duke personally put on her feet, the shoes he had chosen himself. Our heroine felt as if she had turned into Cinderella. After some time, Raffaello said that she seemed to be heading to the alchemist, which is why they came to the temple then. Also in the one that is so far from the center, Dianta explained that Fernando said that he ran out of holy water, so she wants to get some from a friend. Iberk replied that he didn't think that they would immediately give her holy water if the girl came without warning. Our heroine replied that her friend was very capable. A woman immediately came out to them and said that Mr. Matteo was waiting inside. Only a few knew about the existence of Tefania. He had outstanding abilities to predict the future. The guy was above all religions, and in terms of skills, they were compared to the great priest. He was even called God's messenger. Giving a few boxes of holy water was a trifle for him, even though he was blind. Hearing the footsteps, the prophet asked for forgiveness for making them wait. It's just that he always prays at this time. Our heroine replied that on the contrary, she was afraid that she had disturbed his prayer. The young man objected that no, it was he who asked to invite her inside. He even felt awkward in front of the new guest. This was the only place where they could talk in silence. He saw in a dream that the guys would come, which is what they usually say at the first meeting. Very glad that we saw each other again, or something like that. The girl thought to herself that she was already ready to kill him for unnecessary conversations, and he also came up with some kind of prophetic dream. Suddenly, the Duke would think that this was some kind of pseudo-religion. The priest noted that he seemed to be talking too much. He was simply very happy to meet. If he said something unnecessary, he asked for forgiveness. Iberk suddenly stated that he said that he had seen a prophetic dream. How can a priest throw around such ridiculous words? The guy sees that the temple is quite poor. Maybe he lures parishioners here with cheap tricks. The young man replied that the Duke might not believe him, but there was no need to jump to conclusions, as the prophet had already said he was only a priest in a small temple. The girl noted to herself that he was after all a true messenger of God, and he didn't even chicken out in front of Raffaello. After which, the priest added that he had prepared what Miss Dianta needed. Eberk asked if he had seen it in a dream, but the priest ignored him and told our heroine that he would not take money from her this time. Despite the nickname of God's messenger, according to the plot, he was not accepted anywhere. This world revolves with the help of force and power. And Matteo belonged to the Temple of the Moon, which is not a major religion. This fact was not in his favor, and as a result, the prince's knights began to oppress the small religions, and he was captured. The prophet could certainly have known in advance that her circumstances would help him. The young man did not understand why they were looking at each other and smiling. After some time, Dianta said that she was very sorry, but to tell the truth, they were in a hurry. Matteo replied that it was okay. It was enough for him that he saw Missy. In fact, she would like to communicate with him more, but the Duke behaves like a 5-year-old child, and is constantly capricious, saying that they need to hurry. Even now, the young man does not hide his displeasure and stands with an unfriendly expression on his face. The prophet seemed to sense this and said that he had already said that he did not need to behave so cautiously. He is a priest and has no interest in either marriage or romantic relationships. Our heroine thought to herself, "What kind of unexpected statement is this? Why even talk about it?" The priest continued that he would say that he could help. They came together with his close friend if he wanted. He could tell about his future. He usually doesn't offer something like this to other people, but he can make an exception for him. Our heroine began to panic, that she really hoped that the Duke would not beat him. And if so, what to do if he was arrested for beating a priest today? The atmospheric pressure was already low. Suddenly, the prophet added that he had just seen something. Let him continue in the same spirit. And Miss Dianta will understand everything in time when she clarified what it all meant. Mateo said that was all he could tell. After some time, Fernando reported that with the help of that sacred water, he made new crystals. They must immediately be given to the test subject, that is the knight, so that he can try it out. Valerian thought to herself that he was some kind of crazy, although quite nice. Then the alchemist said that she was getting married soon and would no longer be able to come to her. The girl did not understand why she was getting married. The young man explained that he saw an article about her in the newspaper. If she gets married, it would be better to find another fire spellcaster. The Duke declared that he had no need to worry, that what he was so worried about would not happen. Fernando exclaimed that it was time to get started. Then had they prepared the ball for video recording and notes, after which they began to treat the young man who had asked her for this favor. And so the usual life of our heroine continued until the day of the date arrived. The maids were getting her ready from early morning and telling her that she needed to do her hair in volume, and also that the sun's rays were the main enemies of girls, so she should definitely take a hat. When Noel met her at the restaurant, Dianta didn't understand what he was doing there, but the young man smiled affably and said that he would take her to her seat. On the way, the young man asked why she was looking at him so intently. Our heroine muttered that it was simple. In fact, she thought to herself that she should have guessed back then, when the guy sent that letter, that he would do anything just to make fun of her and her date. Still, this is at the request of the mother, especially judging by the portrait. He should be a rather attractive man, so she will just look at him and leave. But when the girl saw Sebastian Botan, she noted that he looked completely different. Maybe Noel just decided to make fun of us and brought someone else on purpose. When the guy decided to pull out a chair for her, Dianta thought that he did have some manners after all. But when she almost fell, the young man immediately began to ask for forgiveness and say that he seemed to have gotten too excited trying to please her. Our heroine replied that it was okay, everything was fine. After which, the girl asked if he had had to wait too long for her to appear. Sebastian replied that, to be honest, it would take a long time, but for the sake of a date with such a beautiful lady, it was worth waiting. Dianta didn't understand what this meant, because she arrived 5 minutes before the appointed time. Then, the waiter asked what the young people would order today. When Valerian opened the menu, she saw a note that the establishment was busy today, and she didn't understand what it meant. After which, she said to bring her cream soup with veal meat. The guy asked if one soup would be enough for her. When our heroine answered that, yes, since she had a slight indigestion in the morning, Botan exclaimed that his stomach also hurt because he was so worried before meeting her that he did not sleep all night. However, due to her headache, Dianta did not immediately guess what Noel's note meant. Namely that today, in the restaurant, there was not only him, but also other people following her. Haint asked Sharon with irritation why this knight was also here since they had agreed to meet together. Raffaello replied that she had promised her brother that she would go everywhere with Sir Diego, and in general, they are now secretly watching someone else's date, so it is necessary to behave quietly. The young people replied that they would try to be patient and behave with restraint. The lady wondered if Eberk really liked Dianta so much that he even agreed to follow her. When she learned that her brother had an interest in her, she began to worry whether her friendship with Valerian would be spoiled if they separated. But in fact, these were vain worries, since the young man always keeps what is dear to him. As a child, he personally darned the blanket that covered him, and even now keeps it in a chest, after which I started dreaming that if they got together, they would have double dates. Suddenly, a loud cry was heard that he did not advise her to lead such a lifestyle. Sebastian hates most of all cunning women who rely only on their appearance. She doesn't attend banquets, so the guy thought that Dianta was different from other ladies. But now he is convinced that she is exactly the same. There is nothing to look at except her face. Two swords suddenly closed on his throat. Haint hissed that he had just said about his sister. The Duke added that he would do better to refrain from unnecessary statements. Botan did not understand who they were. A little earlier, Dianta listened to him chatter about how most of the lands in their kingdom belong to his family, and he also likes to save money, so he puts aside a certain amount from each salary. He is sure that they will become a wonderful couple, as they are suitable for each other, as she sees the guy has had an elegant appearance since childhood, which made the hearts of many girls tremble, but he was looking for someone who would be on the same level as him. Our heroine was thinking about something of her own, and hearing that he said that he had met his soulmate Valerian congratulated him. When the young man asked her again what she had said, the girl realized that she had blurted out something inappropriate, after which she thought that there were only handsome men and women around her. Despite his character, Haint is considered handsome, and the appearance of this young man does not seem impressive to her. Our heroine prefers the type of Duke Raffaello. Sebastian asked, "How about officially starting communication with him?" When the girl started to turn away, the guy clarified that he didn't mean for her to answer right now. But Dianta apologized and added that she believed that he would meet someone better than her. The young man objected that they could be a wonderful couple. His wealth and her beauty would go well together, but a more harmonious couple would have to be found. Besides, she is not an heir someday. She will have to leave the Valerian estate. Let her agree that Botan is a very advantageous match for her. The girl answered that she had more than enough money, but she thought to herself that her parents would leave an inheritance to her as well, since they did not single out one of the children. Suddenly, the Count shouted that he did not advise her to lead such a lifestyle. He hated cunning women most of all, who rely only on their appearance. There is nothing to look at except the face. This is precisely the situation in which the brother and the Duke simply could not help but intervene. When Sebastian was indignant that since when did ladies hang out with such uncouth people, Sharon shouted at him that it was enough. If he continues to insult Dianta, she will not remain on the sidelines either. Haint hissed that he seemed to have trouble seeing with his small eyes. The guy was the brother of this lady he had just insulted. Did he realize that his words would be passed on to the head of the Valerian family? Our heroine asked everyone to stop and first explain what they were all doing in this restaurant. That day, the estate was full of talk, until the night Miss Charity, with a pale face, apologizing for having suggested such a candidate for a date. Naturally, having added that she had thoroughly found out everything in advance, and that this simply could not have happened, a statement was filed against the Count in court for moral damages. Dianta said that Lady Raffaello helped her along with the knight who serves their family. Hint added that after all, the family of knights is special. Even Sharon showed willpower and courage. When the mother asked who this knight was, the son explained that Diego was guarding his beloved. The woman noted that he was a good man, because this situation did not concern him at all. In fact, it was dangerous to treat the Count like that, after which she suggested inviting him to dinner and treating him to delicious food. Then she asked if everyone would have time tomorrow. Her family did not expect her to make such a proposal. As a result, the girl thought so much about the Duke that she could not fall asleep. The guards asked why she was already up, because it was still early morning. Dianta said not to pay attention to her and go about her business. Valerian was thinking about her mother's words. Eberk is hiding his identity and took a huge risk yesterday with his behavior. Fortunately, the newspaper did not write anything about him. It only said that at the meeting, according to the service personnel, the Count behaved in the most terrible way. The girl noted that it was funny, it seemed like Noel tried, and he pretended to be a restaurant employee in a normal situation. It would have made her angry, but now it was timely. Suddenly, a young man's voice was heard, asking what was written there. That was so interesting. Our heroine screamed in surprise and asked where he came from near her estate. The guards immediately shouted who he was, that he dared to approach their mistress, and she should immediately go into the house. But Dianta objected that he was her friend. Noticing that the young man was covered in blood, Valerian told the knights that there was no need to worry, he would go with her, and then dragged him by the hand behind her. When they stepped aside, the girl asked if he was injured. The guy replied that he just gave a warning, and that's all. Having examined his hands, our heroine noted that there were no wounds, and the blood was not his own, whether it was an ordinary fight or a murder. After which she asked the young man who he beat up, or what happened in general. He can't attract attention to himself. Why does he constantly expose himself to danger? What will happen if he is recognized? The Duke replied that no one would find out anything he had dealt with, everyone except that scoundrel. Eberk does everything clean. There is no better way to intimidate a person than to let them see it in person. For example, to demonstrate to this person the reprisal against those who guard him. Dianta thought to herself that she had worried in vain. She had completely forgotten what kind of person he was, after which she said that now the Count would not be able to open his mouth for fear of dying. After which she asked what that man had done, that he personally intervened in this matter. Unexpectedly, the Duke replied that Sebastian had acted stupidly and had committed a simply unforgivable act, not suspecting that the boy was watching him. He had tried to harm what belonged to him. Our heroine asked in surprise what had something really been stolen from him. She thought to herself that she didn't even know what surprised her more, that someone had dared to steal something from the Duke, or that he had tried to damage it, exposing himself to such danger. The young man asked if she was worried about him. Our heroine answered that of course she was. The Duke replied that he was very pleased to hear that she was worried about him. Apparently, he needs to continue to make her worry about him from time to time. Dianta thought to herself, is he going to continue fighting until he bleeds? Maybe he has problems with his head. That's why she said that he was speaking in such terrible words. She was not just worried about him now, so there was no need to even think about such things. After which she warned that next time, she would tell his younger sister everything. The young man muttered that it turned out that she had been worried about him before. Our heroine immediately realized that she had said too much, but it was too late. Then she decided to change the subject and asked if he knew that he was invited to an official dinner. Her parents sent an invitation to him and Sharon. They wanted to thank Eberk for helping hers. The guy explained that he hadn't been at the estate since lunch, so he hadn't heard anything about it. The girl noted to herself that he was just a workaholic, after which she asked whether she was accidentally distracting him from his work, since he was apparently very busy. The young man replied that he had already sorted everything out, so it was okay, he was just taking a walk, and accidentally wandered into the estate, so they would see each other for dinner soon. Sometime later, at the Raffaello estate, the Duke's sister came into his room and asked where he had been since the previous evening. Eberk may not answer, but let him tell her one thing, how he feels about her friend. She would very much like to know what her elder brother thinks of Lady Valerian she is for him. The next day, Sharon and the Duke arrived for a formal dinner. Everything started off smoothly enough. After some time, Haint said that, of course, he could have handled it alone, but he was still grateful to him for intervening and standing up for his sister's honor. The young man replied that he had done what every knight in his place should have done. After the boys shook hands, they immediately started wiping their hands with a handkerchief. Dianta wondered why they weren't picking on each other today. Then she noticed that her friend was behaving strangely and asked if she wanted to tell her something. But the Duchess replied that no, she didn't want anything. Then Haint asked if Sharon could go somewhere with him. He had a gift for her, and it should have been delivered by now. The girl immediately began to push her lover and say that of course she would go with him, and she herself winked at Dianta. But she did not understand why Raffaello was looking at her like that. Our heroine asked if the Duke would follow them. Eberk asked if she wanted this. Valerian replied that it seemed to her that he began to care less about her brother. The young man replied that Sharon had offered him a deal, so he was now thinking about whether to agree or not. After some time, the elder brother's voice was heard saying that it was possible to fall, so it would be better for him to carry them, but the Duchess objected that no, these were her flowers, so she would carry them herself. The young man laughed and said that he could not understand where his beloved was and where the flowers were. The girl asked if he was exalting her too much. Our heroine noted to herself that because of the flowers, her friend really couldn't be seen, but she was also worried about why the Duke was behaving so quietly. Haint stated that he gave her this bouquet on purpose because he wanted to say something. After what happened to his sister, various thoughts were spinning in his head. For example, that she might go north and meet some young gentleman there and marry him. Therefore, the young man decided to personally go north and obtain permission for marriage from her brother. If he officially gives permission for their union, will she marry him? The girl was a little confused, so there was a long pause. The groom immediately became gloomy and asked for forgiveness for not having restrained himself and having rushed. Dianta noted that he was shocked because it was not easy for him to say such words. For them, the North is an environment completely opposite to their nature. His words mean that he is ready to risk his life for Sharon. It was a carefully considered decision and a proposal of marriage. Now the brother has the feeling that he has been refused, so it is understandable why he is in a stupor, while the Duchess babbled that this does not mean that she refuses him. Suddenly, the Duke's voice was heard saying that there was no need for him to go north. Haint asked if he was suggesting that the boy convey this through him, but the youth did not want to speak with the knight, but with Duke Raffaello himself. Eberk replied that this was precisely why he was suggesting that he tell him everything, after which the young man added that the one he so longed to see was Sir Diego, Duke Raffaello. The guy objected that if you look at the family portrait, it doesn't look like him at all. Let's say the guy could have put on a wig, but it's impossible to change the color of your eyes. The young man replied that this was precisely why he did not want to say anything. Because of his emotions, he put Sharon in a difficult position, and for this very reason, he does not like Haint. The young man was angered by these words, and flames immediately appeared around him. Our heroine wondered if he had really gone completely crazy to decide to use his abilities. But the Duke drew his sword, which easily dealt with his fire. Valerian was very surprised, as this is the same technique of the ball of the Raffaello family that cuts even magic, after which the young man asked whether Haint now believed him. When the elder brother realized that the real Duke was standing before him, he fell into complete despair. A few days later, at the Eberk estate, the young man was riding around him and saying that he had brought wine made from grapes that only grow in the lands of Trollins 30 years old. Then he took out a pair of men's shoes and asked him if he liked them. Dianta noted to herself that he was holding up quite well in the current situation. Sharon entered the room and asked when her friend had managed to arrive, and why Haint was acting so strangely. The Duchess is very afraid that something might happen, that they might fight again. The girl replied that they were in the Duke's estate, so that wouldn't happen, although it was unknown what would happen if the brother went outside when Raffaello began to panic. Valerian immediately added that she was joking. Iberk doesn't like her older brother, but she loves this man, so she doesn't think that the Duke will harm him, so it's better to leave them and go dry her hair. It won't take long to get sick. After they left, the young man noted that, as soon as Haint found out who he was, that is he immediately began to behave differently. The young man exclaimed that he reacted very quickly. He immediately takes action in any situation. This is an excellent quality. After some time, the guy entered the girl's room, and Dianta asked if there was any progress, but the brother dejectedly replied that not much. The Duchess asked if her lover could speak to her. Our heroine thought that it was worth leaving them alone, so she went outside. The sun was shining so brightly that it blinded her eyes. Maybe it was worth going back home and taking a nap. Suddenly, the Duke appeared and asked if she was hurt, but the girl replied that the sun was simply shining very brightly. The guy put his hand on her eyes, and she felt this cold, after which he asked if everything was okay. Valerian answered that yes, and thanked him for his help. When Iberk said that if she was already getting ready to leave, he would see her off, our heroine exclaimed that it was not worth it since she had arrived in her own carriage. The guy replied that naturally he knew that she had not arrived on horseback, and so he was not going to walk her home. It dawned on the girl that he meant that he would simply walk her to the carriage. But the Duke added that if she wished he could walk her all the way home. Dianta objected that it was not necessary, after which she wished him a good day and quickly began to walk away. Meanwhile, in the imperial palace, the prince was reading an article about an unsuccessful date, after which he gave the order to deal with this Count Botan so that no problems would arise in the future. The man replied that he would do it immediately. His Highness added that, however, he had still found out nothing about that night. The subordinate replied that he had contacted all the information guilds in the capital, but only one had managed to get any information. They had sent him a portrait of this knight as a child. This guy comes from a ruined aristocratic family. His parents died of illness when he was just born. He spent half his life on the street as a beggar. Livios noted that it was a pity because he wanted to show himself from the best side in front of the emperor. The man sent spies several times to follow the duke. Most of them either died on the way, or all contact with them was lost. Even if someone managed to reach the northern lands, it was not easy to get out of there. Then the prince said that no news had been heard from that man lately. Perhaps something had happened. The servant replied that they had not heard from him for a whole month. Livios asked if there was a magical device for such cases. The man replied that they could not use it now, since there was no energy left in the magic crystals, after which he fell to his knees and asked for forgiveness for not warning him in advance. The young man replied that it was okay, he was planning to meet his uncle tomorrow anyway, so he would get the crystals himself. When Iberk first arrived in the north, he thought that he would quickly be broken by the harsh living conditions, as happened to other newcomers. However, at some point, the northerners began to see him as an irreplaceable person. His assistant Aaron had so many tasks and was so tired that it seemed like he would die soon. The duke, when he left all the affairs to him, said that he would return soon, but in fact he had been gone for a very long time. The real Natan Diego asked when he could go take a bath because he smelled so bad. The young man replied that he would bring water, and he would wash himself here in the corner. The boy could blame not him for this, but their departed master. Diego objected that if the duke had not taken him in, he would have remained starving on the street. So on the contrary, he was very grateful to him. Except for some unpleasant sensation, the assistant asked him to bear it a little longer. Meanwhile, Haint was dreamily wondering where it would be best to hold the wedding ceremony. It should probably be an even more luxurious place than where the engagement took place. But then the brother would have to go to the capital, and that would be inconvenient. But he can't take all the guests to the north, so what should he do? Dianta asked why he was making so much noise. The guy exclaimed that he had a date today, so he came to make fun of her. Let her not worry, there will be a man who will tolerate her terrible character. The girl was thinking about what they had agreed on then. It seemed the conversation had ended well. The young man asked if she would come too, but our heroine replied that she would not, because she would be going to see a friend today. The elder brother exclaimed, "What other friend does she really have?" "Friends," Valerian angrily replied that in fact she does. When they met, Noel asked if she had finally realized how valuable he was, and what brought her to their tavern. The bartenders exclaimed that this waiter was extremely gallant. Let her accept his feelings. The guy immediately picked up and said that he would court her, but Dianta asked him to stop. The men immediately said that he had better give up this idea. They would introduce the lady to the nephew of one of them. The guy immediately said that there was too much attention on them today, so it would be better to go somewhere else. His friend runs a pretty good cafe. On the way, the young man said that this meant that this was their first date, but the girl told him to calm down already. After which, she shoved a note in his face, which asked one question. Was that article his doing? Noel replied that yes, after which he ate the message, adding that it was edible paper. Very tasty, would she like to try it? But our heroine replied that no. After that, they continued the conversation with the help of notes. To summarize, he received an order from the emperor to find out everything about Natan Diego, so he sold false information. Luckily, he met with Mateo beforehand and was able to make a fake portrait. It dawned on the girl that His Highness had guessed that the Duke had been at the ball, and now there was more evidence. Noel bowed and thanked her for using his services, 20 gold pieces. Taking into account the discount for old friendship, the girl was taken aback and muttered that she didn't have any money with her right now. The young man replied that in that case, he suggested having lunch together. The waiter asked if he was really going to order the entire menu. The guy replied that it was a trade-off when another establishment came. He definitely had to try everything. Suddenly, our heroine heard Haint's voice, who addressed the Duke and called him brother, after which he added that he had found out in advance that according to rumors, this restaurant was opened by the court chef. Eberk asked irritably, since when he became his brother. The guy replied that since the young man was older than him, it was natural to address him in that manner. Sharon asked them to stop and asked why they only talked to each other all the time. Raffaello immediately asked if he had heard her words. The young man would be very grateful if they ended the dialogue here. Dianta asked Noel to look at the next table and suggested that they leave quietly. The young man immediately said that he knew where the back exit was, so he dragged her along with him. But they did not manage to escape unnoticed, as the Duchess saw them running away, holding hands. After some time, the girl said that she was very tired. Could she go home already? But her companion answered no. After which, he added that she should go with him to the store, since he needed to buy something there. That place looks quite gloomy, so he is scared to go there alone. Dianta said that the man who is 2 years older than her does not seem cute with that expression. In the end, she gave in to his whining. This building looked more like an abandoned one where they do something illegal. The young man explained that there was no other place where one could see the same range of goods. After all, crystals can only be bought in government shops, and you also have to provide personal information. And in this place, without all these formalities, and at a low price, you can buy low-quality crystals. This is a fairly well-known shop in the narrow circles of the shadow world. Our heroine clarified that perhaps they should then hide their identities, but the young man replied that he knew the owner. Suddenly, a voice was heard asking what the lady was doing there. Dianta stuttered and asked who it was, but she noted to herself that these people were dressed in such a way as to hide their identity. "I take off my hood." The guy said that she was offending him. How could she not recognize his voice at all? When the servant tried to stop him, the prince replied that everything was fine. The miss was also going to this shop. She wouldn't start rumors about him, because now they were in the same boat. After some time in the carriage, our heroine felt extremely awkward, as she did not think that she would meet Levios in such a place. The young man asked if they really didn't have to give her friend a ride. The girl replied that yes, because if someone recognizes him, trouble could happen. She thought to herself that she couldn't introduce Noel to him, because in the future, he would destroy the Information Guild and kill all of its members when he ascended to the throne. After Dianta asked why he went to such a place, the prince asked if she was really interested. The young man explained that this man was his uncle Baron Clive Desiderio, and that he was also the head of the Scaforia Merchant Guild, and sometimes accompanied him when he needed to explore the market. Since His Highness has answered her question, can you now ask her one question too? The girl began to panic about what to answer if he suddenly asked what she was doing in the shop. But suddenly, the prince asked how he was to her. After all, someone like Levios is quite good, isn't it? The guy read in the newspaper that she was matched with the count. Did she really reject Sebastian for him? This is already a bit too much. Our heroine replied that she had never even thought of anything like that, but unforeseen circumstances occurred. The young man replied that he too would like such unforeseen circumstances to happen to him. Sometime later, getting out of the carriage, His Highness said that he would look forward to their next meetings. When it turned out that Dianta was ill, the maid exclaimed that she knew it. She had been going out too much lately. How many times had she told her to change her clothes and wash herself immediately after being outside? But the lady always puts off both of these things, which is why she caught a cold. The girl thought that she would quickly recover, but the more time passed, the higher her temperature rose, and she simply slept. Perhaps her body itself was sending her signs. The doctor noted that even in her normal state, she has an elevated body temperature due to genetic characteristics. Mother asked if this meant that medicines would not help here. The man replied that this disease was connected with physical characteristics. Most likely even priests would not be able to cope here. Our heroine would like to say that everything is fine, but you can't tell from her voice. If she is having such a hard time because of a simple fever, then how does the Duke endure attacks of that disease? In the future, even more efforts must be made to treat her. At night, Dianta woke up because she was very thirsty and saw that her mother was sleeping next to her bed. Then it turned out that it was not only Mother there, but her entire family. Did they really stay with her on purpose? They say that when you are sick, the soul becomes weak. Looking at her relatives, who were so worried about her, I just wanted to cry. Perhaps her abilities disappeared due to illness. The air in the room was very hot. Therefore, she decided to go and open the door, since probably her whole family was hot too. As soon as Valerian went out onto the balcony, a young man immediately appeared and asked how she was feeling. Our heroine thought to herself that her parents and Haint were in her room, so how else could he have come here? It must be just a dream, so she can hug the Duke tightly, which is good since she was just feeling very hot. When she pressed herself against him, it felt very good for a moment, but then her body began to burn from the inside. Apparently she had not yet fully recovered. The young man noted that it seemed that her temperature was rising again. Was everything okay with her? Our heroine replied that it hurt, but she thought to herself that she didn't want to part with him for a second. Raffaello said that her temperature was higher than usual. Valerian objected that his was in fact lower than usual. Iberk explained that she thought so because she felt unwell. The girl asked if he felt the same. The Duke asked to clarify what exactly. Dianta replied that just now, even when she hugged him, everything inside her was boiling, and she was tormented by thirst. Surprisingly, but now this feeling has passed, so her soul felt very good. The young man wanted to answer her something, but our heroine interrupted him and asked him to just stand there for a little while longer. The next day, Mother said that if there had been guests, they would have known about it. Everyone was asleep, and if someone had suddenly sneaked in, her father or brother would have immediately found out about it. Our heroine muttered what it meant to dream. The woman answered that it happens that because of fever, dreams get confused with reality. Dianta still didn't fully understand what it was, but the situation was very confusing to her. Noticing that she was very red all over, her mother exclaimed that she really still had a fever. Haint immediately said that he would go and call the doctor, but Valerian objected that everything was fine, it was just a cold. The guy exclaimed that fire mages never get sick like that. She could at least imagine how surprised and scared they were. The parents couldn't even go to work. They spent the whole day near her. He will not bother her, and if something does not work out, even with his efforts, only then will he ask for her help. So let him not be silent when she is having a hard time. The young man will keep his mouth shut, and she should under no circumstances overexert herself. Regarding her illness, the doctor said that it was difficult to determine the cause, so magicians and alchemists were called in, causing complete chaos. Mother reported that it seemed that due to the high consumption of mana, the body physically could not withstand it. But this is the capital, not the battlefield the daughter could not use so much. Dianta exclaimed, "That is true." I noted to myself that it seemed that more mana was being spent during each treatment than expected. The day passed, and she could hardly get out of bed. Her brother still had to watch over her. The girl asked in surprise if he had really postponed the meeting with Sharon to look after her. The guy replied that, of course, he had no choice since his parents had gone to work, and tearfully begged him to take care of his sister. Our heroine said that Haint is already so big, she thought that he was just a fool blinded by love. The young man asked her not to talk like a grandmother, after which the young man added that in fact he had been an adult from the very beginning. Dianta was indignant at how he could hit his sick sister, but Valerian only snorted. Suddenly, the Duke's stern voice was heard from behind, asking if he had really hit his sick sister. The elder brother exclaimed that there had simply been a misunderstanding, but the girl did not understand how he had entered so silently. Sharon then appeared at the door and said that she had heard that he was physically abusive. Then she added that she was joking. She knows that Haint could not do that. The Duchess thought that fire mages don't get sick. The guy replied that they were also very surprised when they found out. But it was something other than a simple cold. Sister used up a lot of mana, which is why the temperature rose, despite the fact that Dianta has nothing to spend that much on. Raffaello whispered that Eberk was very worried yesterday. At night, he received news from someone that his girlfriend was sick and immediately left the mansion. It dawned on the girl that it was not a dream. The caresses, hugs, and all those words about the pleasant coolness were reality. Then she went out onto the balcony and began to try to reassure herself that it all just had to be a dream. When the Duke reappeared and asked why she had gone out, our heroine began to point her finger at him and ask if he was real. Having made sure that yes, Valerian asked that perhaps he had come yesterday too. The young man replied that yes, he had come to visit her. The girl asked how she got to the bed at all, since she didn't remember it at all. The young man replied that naturally she fell asleep in his arms, so he brought her to bed. No one even found out about this. It seems everyone was tired of courting the lady. Dianta didn't understand what was happening to him. His expression was very sad, after which she asked if perhaps she had done something wrong to him. Eberk replied that of course not. He was the only one to blame for dragging her into this. After all, the reason she is ill is not the treatment of the young man. Our heroine asked why he felt guilty, since she herself volunteered to help him. The young man responded that they needed to end it. Dianta asked if he had decided to stop. When the girl noticed that his breathing had quickened, which meant that he was feeling unwell, she wanted to take his hand, but he abruptly pulled her away. When the boy asked what she was doing, Valerian replied that she was going to treat him. Eberg replied that he had already told the alchemist, so there was no longer any need for her treatment. The girl objected that there was no new method or new device. The young man said that he could be patient. Dianta thought to herself that his illness was due to magic, while she just had a high fever due to the high consumption of mana. After which she said that he had a difficult illness. If you throw breathing aside, then what will he do with a frozen body and black smoke around? Moreover, how will he manage to hide this from his younger sister? The Duke replied that in any case she might lose consciousness again. Wasn't it because of him that Valerian used up all her mana? The girl noted to herself that he was avoiding her gaze, and this began after Haint announced the reason for the illness today. Our heroine wondered why he was so nice today, and replied that it was not his fault. It's all because she doesn't know how to properly control her powers, and if things suddenly get hard for her again, he will help her. Does he remember yesterday in his arms? It was so cool that she was able to relax and fall asleep, and then surprisingly, the temperature dropped, so now everything is fine, only thanks to him. The Duke asked if she was afraid. The girl answered why she should be afraid, because he would save her again. She thought to herself that he needs her, and when he spends a lot of mana, Eberk becomes necessary to her, so nothing else is scary. After the treatment was completed, our heroine announced that it was time for her to go. She wanted to leave quickly, but almost lost her balance, and immediately thought to herself that no matter how you look at it, there was no way to hide fatigue. The young man picked her up again and said that he would accompany her to bed. Dianta noted that due to lack of strength, she is completely unable to resist. Having put her to bed, the Duke told her to cover herself well and sleep. But now it was definitely time for him to go. Valerian didn't want him to leave, so she asked if he could stay a little longer. Please let him stay close until she fell asleep, after which she asked if she could take his hand. The guy replied that it was fine. He would take care of her peace of mind, let her rest. Meanwhile, in the Raffaello mansion, the guards shouted at the beggar to go beg elsewhere. The man objected that he was a knight of the north. The boy was indignant that what kind of knight is he without documents? In that case, he could be a prince. It was the real Natan Diego who thought to himself that he had given them to the Duke, but he must, as soon as possible, hand over the affairs from the north. A little earlier, his assistant told him that if he put on a helmet, only his eyes would be visible, and everyone would think he was an ordinary knight. The young man objected that as soon as he took out his sword, they would immediately expose him. There is a storm raging outside, and it is different from the usual, as several eddies have formed at once, plus the appearance of monsters, which begin to attack in droves from their habitat not far from the northern castle. The young man objected that if there was a storm, there it would not be easy to send a letter. Natan asked, "What about the magical communication device?" The young man replied that there was none, that you can't buy one in the poor north. Moreover, if a person from the northern lands has this thing, the emperor will immediately send people. Usually, after the end of a campaign, one can live peacefully for about 2 or 3 weeks. But this time, the Duke did not go for a day or two, so there was a hypothesis that it would take a month, but no more. The assistant miscalculated. If this continues, a secret spy may learn of Eberk's disappearance. Diego said that he thought it would be right if he pretended to be a duke and pretended to leave the castle. The assistant objected that he had never been to the north alone. The guy replied that if this continued, his disguise would also be revealed. If the Duke had not saved him in childhood, he would have been dead long ago, so he is willing to accept this danger. He shouldn't worry so much. He'll try to avoid monsters as much as possible, and when checking the identity, there will be some method, be it a bribe or something else. But the young man guessed that he could get into big trouble. Eberk suddenly appeared and asked what kind of noise they were making here and who he was. The next day, Natan exclaimed that he finally felt alive. He no longer even remembered the last time he washed. The Duke asked what prompted him to come here in such a state. It was clearly not just like that. The young man replied that Mr. Aaron had asked him to accompany the gentleman to the north, and the young man asked whether they should set out immediately. Diego was surprised that Eberk didn't want to come back, but he heard that the lady would be in danger if the guy didn't leave, and he usually doesn't like to leave the mansion, so he does everything in secret. After which, the young man asked whether this was because of his sister's refusal to go north. The young man replied that he had not planned from the very beginning to take her to a place where few people could walk in the yard. The guy noted to himself that this was his longing for Sharon and his jealous desire to test the man who wanted to take his precious little sister. Then he asked why he was hesitating. Then, the Duke thought that he needed Lady Dianta, and she needed Raffaello. When the girl asked him to stay next to her, it caused feelings that he had never experienced before. His heart beat faster than usual, and his blood circulated noticeably. After which the young man sadly replied that they would leave in one day. Having prepared the bouquet, Sharon noted that she should give it to Eberk and tell him to visit her friend. This should help develop their relationship. Suddenly, her older brother appeared in her bedroom and said that he would not be staying long. The Duchess immediately recognized the young man who stood behind him. It was the real Natan Diego. The girl remembers the day when they both left for the north, but why is the young man here again? Raffaello immediately became uneasy, and she began to guess that today was the last day. She immediately rushed to her brother and asked why so suddenly. The young man asked for forgiveness and replied that he simply had to leave. Sharon knew that one day he would come back. From the very beginning. Her brother risked himself to meet her because he had to disguise himself and hide his identities. But if he leaves this time, then it is unknown when they will meet next time. So she burst into tears and exclaimed that the guy said that they would be together for a whole month. Meanwhile, our heroine finally recovered, went for a walk, and admired the beautiful garden. Everyone behaved extremely strangely, as they were forbidden to even go out to breathe fresh air. Even for people like Matteo, whom she had to visit in person, due to the lack of a magical communication device, she received a lot of gifts and greeting letters. The priest wrote that he would like to visit her immediately, but unfortunately, in his situation, this is impossible, so he wishes her well-being and always waits for her at his place. It suddenly started to rain, and our heroine didn't even realize when the clouds had managed to gather because the weather was so beautiful. The maid noted that, but well, it happened. Just when the mistress had just recovered, the girl replied that that was exactly it. Fortunately, she was near the mansion. Then the maid announced that a guest had just arrived, so she escorted him to the living room. It turned out to be Noel, who exclaimed that, "Wow, Dianta seems to be completely healthy." The girl asked what kind of strange reaction he was having. Did he really want her to continue to be sick? After which she turned to Daisy, told her to leave, and not let anyone into the room. The boy exclaimed that it was a great relief, because he thought that everything was really bad a couple of days before Mr. Matteo said that he saw her crying. So the young man began to monitor her behavior. Dianta asked, what was he really investigating behind her back? It was a common cold, but thanks for the concern. Then she asked if it was true that the priest saw that she was crying. The guy answered that yes, and a lot, after which he began to demonstrate exactly how. Then the young man stated that since everything was fine, he had to go before it started raining again, but our heroine asked him to stop. She found his behavior very strange, so she asked what the young man had done. Noel replied that it was not normal for Dianta, who does not know what tears are, to cry. So he contacted his acquaintances, namely Adelaide and Wolfgang. The guys exclaimed that it was really that same Valerian who was crying and was on the verge of life and death. They should immediately move towards her. And after that, the guy lost contact with them. The girl noted to herself that this was a disaster. As soon as she remembered these two, among all, from her past life, she tried to keep them as a backup. Adelaide is the queen of mercenaries, a responsible and very strong-willed woman. She has a big soul, and everything always goes smoothly. Wolfgang, her opposite, a wandering poet, who knew no responsibility or nationality, but he was an outstanding empath, whose soul was easily hurt, so he often cried. It seems that this is why, every time they encountered each other, hatred boiled within them, leading them to fights. The only thing they had in common was a lack of understanding of each other. No matter how high-ranking a person they were, no matter how much money they had, these two did only what they wanted. Adelaide, our heroine, chose as submission or suppression. Wolfgang created only the songs he wanted, following her steps. Valerian noted that she would just have to accept it and get over it. Some time later, the maid asked if the mistress was really going to the training ground. The girl replied that yes, she does not go beyond the limits. Don't worry, once the condition has stabilized, sweating is a very good option. When Dianta first realized that she had been reborn inside a novel, she lived in the training grounds all day long. Until then, she was the only daughter, so she only watched her father and brother practice without training on her own, because of which the parents even asked if she had any intention of becoming an heir, but this was a simple interest in her will. Therefore, until she decided to connect the two main characters, she worked almost tirelessly. The maid watched her with admiration and said that she was simply incredible. Valerian replied that such movements did not mean anything to her yet, but she noted to herself that she was convinced that she was not yet rusty. Suddenly, a young man's voice was heard, noting that she had finally finished. The elder brother immediately began to pull the maid out, saying that they needed to talk, but our heroine did not understand why they were leaving. When the girl said that she should wait a little, since she needed to take a handkerchief, the young man replied that it would not be long, so there was no need for it. Our heroine noticed that he was wearing armor and did not understand why. So I asked if the Duke was comfortable in such an outfit on this rainy day. The guy replied that he was fine, after which Dianta asked if he came with Sharon. Hearing some noise in the corridor, the girl noted that it was necessary to go out and see what was going on there. Before this, the sister told Aberg that it was stuffy in the carriage, so she would wait in the corridor, let her talk calmly with her friend, and return back. After which the young man said that he could not leave her there for long, so he would be brief. Then he said that he needed to return north. Perhaps when the rain stopped, they could leave tomorrow. The girl began to form a picture in her head of why he was in armor and why he was so sad. Then she asked if Sharon had not insisted on coming to the estate, would the young man have come on his own or not? After which, our heroine screamed that he really thought of leaving without saying a word to her. In principle, caring only for the sister is to the Duke's liking, so it is not surprising. Even at their first meeting, he said that if he had stayed in the north, he would not have gotten sick. Dianta was tired of the extra work due to this situation. But now, even though her wish is coming true, it is becoming very sad. The young man replied that he was leaving her, but would never forget her. After which, he thanked her for everything. Our heroine noted that he spoke as if they would never see each other again. Eberk replied that this was quite possible. Returning to the capital is very difficult, because he will become a burden for Sharon to come to a place where his illness does not leave him. If he knew that everything would turn out like this, he would not have come at all, or rather, if he knew that returning back is so difficult. Our heroine did not understand what he was saying and wanted to ask him to explain. But suddenly, her elder brother and the Duchess burst into the room, shouting that something was wrong with the knight. The boys saw that Natan Diego was lying on the floor unconscious. The young man had icy skin and heavy breathing. Could it be that he had contracted magic poisoning? Haint shouted that it was necessary to first bring him inside and call a doctor, but our heroine objected that nothing needed to be done. The elder brother asked in what sense, since the man was feeling ill, but the girl replied that she would help him, after which she sat down next to the guy and asked Sharon for forgiveness for not telling him about this earlier. She has nothing to say if she really knew her friend would still get angry. So she added that when she finished, she would explain everything. 5 minutes before the guy was spying on the Duke and Dianta, wondering if this was really the lady from all the talk. Sharon noticed this and said that it was enough of this nonsense, because eavesdropping was not nice, so let him move away from the door. A little earlier, the sister said that Lady Valerian is not a stranger. The guy replied that they are strangers. The girl replied that she didn't believe his words. He was lying because he was simply scared. Natan noted that it was the first time he saw such an expression on the Duke's face. He doesn't know why, but he has a feeling that he has some kind of relationship with this lady. Then the young man sneezed very suddenly and loudly. The guys exclaimed if everything was okay with him. The guy replied that he was completely fine. But literally, a moment later, the guy began to lose consciousness right before their eyes. When our heroine took the crystal in her hands and was about to help the sick man, the Duke suddenly grabbed her hand. Dianta was outraged that she almost used it on the guy a little more, and there would have been trouble. He then took the stone from the girl and gave it to Haint, telling him to use his fire magic on Diego. Lady Valerian began to resent that she should have done it. But the Duke stopped her again and said that it was impossible. What would she do if she fell ill again? Our heroine thought to herself that he wanted to leave without even warning. So why was he looking at her with that look again? When the patient began to have a magical reaction, the elder brother exclaimed, "What is this? He could die like this." But the girl replied that it was okay. It would all disappear very soon. After which, Sharon came up to her and asked her to tell her what was going on. Dianta realized that there was no more time to wait, so it was time to shed light on the truth. After some time, the friend stated that it turns out Valerian knew about all this from the very beginning. Our heroine replied that she did and asked for forgiveness. After which she added that a cure for this magic poisoning had not yet been invented. The Duchess immediately burst into tears. Having calmed down a little, Sharon muttered that she hadn't known about this, which was why she had been reluctant to go north. The Duke replied that that was why he didn't tell her, so that she wouldn't blame herself. The young man, on the contrary, wanted to remember these days as the happiest time in so many years, and he was happy thanks to her. When their brothers went away to talk, Dianta felt extremely awkward, after which she turned to the Duchess and asked for forgiveness for not telling her about this earlier. Raffaello replied that everything was fine. They were friends after all, and her friend wanted the best anyway. Eberk knows more about her than she thought because of her brother. The girl could not tell because they kept silent, because they were worried about her. When Dianta replied that she was still sorry, Sharon countered that it wasn't worth it. Thanks for telling her now. And most importantly, thank you so much for protecting him from behind, so that he could stay safe with her. Suddenly, Haint appeared behind her and put his hand on her shoulder. Our heroine was scared, as it was unexpected. Because of this, the girl suddenly ran back and crashed into the young man. I noted to myself that I was about to burst into tears, so I was sensitive enough to be scared. The Duke told Lady Valerian to be careful not to get hurt, after which he said that it was time for him to go, and simply walked past her. But the girl stopped him and clarified that he was talking about going when the rain stopped. Does that mean tomorrow? When Eberk replied that perhaps our heroine said that then until tomorrow, after which she added that before leaving it was necessary to say goodbye. The young man asked her to continue to take care of his sister. After some time, Natan asked if they couldn't go after waiting another day, but the guy replied that no, they would go now. I thought to myself that this one day would definitely turn into two, and where there are two, there are three. Meanwhile, Dianta was thinking that wasn't it, a bit much what Haint had said last night. The Duke told him that it was not that he still did not like him, but the boy admitted that no one could make his sister laugh like her lover, so he should take care of her. It felt like Eberk decided to leave right away because it looks like he came to say his last words. The young man is not going to leave without waiting for the rain to stop. One has only to imagine how she is overcome with anger. It is not for nothing that they say that a bad feeling never fails. Therefore, our heroine decided that she needed to go to the Raffaello mansion right now. On the way, Dianta asked why her brother was following her. The guy replied that by going with her, he would be able to see Sharon. Near the gate, the girl saw a strange young man and could not understand who he was, but it seemed that he was from the imperial palace. The young man reported that His Highness the Crown Prince had heard of her illness, so he brought gifts sent from him. Our heroine replied that it was fine, she would accept them with great gratitude. When she added that she was now leaving the mansion, so please let him leave them, inside the guy's expression immediately changed. I noted to myself that the gifts had been cleared out recently, but at the moment this was completely unimportant. Sometime later, arriving at the Raffaello mansion, the guys learned that the Duke had already left. Dianta asked why he lied to her then. The guy came whenever he wanted, left whenever he wanted. Why didn't he let her say goodbye? The girl thought that during this time they had at least gotten a little closer. But was it all a delusion? Now the young man will return to the north, and he will no longer need her help. When our heroine involuntarily exclaimed that he had left, Sharon asked if he was okay, or a friend. Lady Valerian, there was nothing left to do but answer that everything was fine. After which she turned around abruptly and began to leave, saying that she had come to say goodbye. But since he was not there, she was going back. Then she added that let the elder brother stay here, and she would go first. Finding herself outside, the girl was surprised when it had managed to clear up so much. I wonder if it will still be cloudy. Meanwhile, the prince stated that having seen the gifts from him, she did not even check them. If everything were so easy, it would not be so interesting. Besides this, the knight secretly left the mansion at dawn, and in the morning the lady visited the duchy. He does not think that this is a coincidence. The subordinate replied that this was clearly not just like that. Livios asked why. The man replied that he had been able to contact the man in the north with the help of a magic stone he had given him. but the Duke had never shown his face since completing his long expedition. Plus, the period coincides with the disappearance of the Duke, as well as the knight Natan Diego, who was also not seen. His Highness noted that there were too many coincidences. The servant added, "You could go and check it right now." But the Crown Prince looked him straight in the eye and threateningly told him to leave it, after which he began to influence him with the help of magic and said that he had changed his mind. The Duke was not important at all. What was more important was that he had gone through this. After some time, the maid came to our heroine and said that she had been sitting in confinement in her room for several days in a row, so she should be strong. After which she added that she received a message, but the girl told her to just put it somewhere. But when Lady Valerian heard that the letter came from Fernando, she immediately jumped up in bed. The alchemist wrote that he had created new proportions of a cure for magic poisoning. Let them come together this time. Personal observation also helps him a lot. Our heroine immediately informed the maid that she would go out for a short time. She would go alone since she did not need an escort. I thought to myself that if he found out that the Duke had left, he would probably be very disappointed. When the girl told him about this new one, the guy fell to the ground and screamed loudly. Oh no! His only test subject Dianta thought to herself, how could one be so desperate? Fernando muttered that it wasn't like they gave it to him and then took it away. He was there, but he didn't see it often. Then the guy disappeared. Now he'll have to look for a test subject again. The alchemist didn't do that much. When Valerian asked him to calm down, the young man screamed that, how could he calm down? It made a big difference whether he was there or not. His medicines were doomed. After which the young man asked that if this had happened, then perhaps they would go together to the northern lands. Our heroine did not expect such a question, so she said that she needed time to think. The alchemist replied that he could not wait long, and upon hearing the answer, he would immediately go north. The girl asked how he was going to create medicines without her. The guy replied that even if it was illegal, all means were good, except that every time he needed to, he would go through familiar places, even if it took a lot of time. This time he felt it firsthand, through the knight who arrived from the north. He must get what he wants at any cost, but now he needs to be in the northern lands. A person who has personally experienced magic poisoning is undoubtedly different from the progress of the trials. Dianta took note of his expression and noted that it seemed the Duke's return to the north had been the impetus for the action, after which she told the young man that she would contact him a little later. Then she immediately went to the priest, who noted that she was alone today. The girl said that the Duke had returned to the north again. Mateo stated that the reason for her tears was now clear. Our heroine replied that she actually didn't cry even during her illness. It seems his prediction was wrong. The guy objected that this simply couldn't be. He believed that not only flowing tears could be called crying. This expression can also be used when upset about parting with a close friend or acquaintance who has suddenly become distant. Lady Valerian noted to herself that although he was not a friend, he was clearly a close person to her. She did so much for him, and when he left easily without even telling her anything. The guy probably thought that since he got everything he needed from her, he could just throw her away like an unnecessary thing. The voice of the prophet interrupted her thoughts, who said that by openly stating these words, serve as an attraction for the aggro, so they will immediately come running to her aid. Behind the doors, the sound of stamping feet and irritated voices arguing with each other immediately began to be heard. Then Adelaide appeared in the room, indignant that she had come with this crybaby, and Wolfgang lamented that why should he be with this inhuman woman. But upon seeing Dianta, the boys' expressions immediately changed to a friendly one, and they exclaimed that they hadn't seen her for a long time. When an awkward silence ensued, our heroine asked how they had been doing all this time. The boy replied that it was good, but it seemed that the life of mercenaries was hard, and the woman replied that for them, the wounds they had were like an honor, since it was proof of how hard they were trying to survive. On the one hand, you are an idle grasshopper, but now you look fat like a real pig. The young man immediately burst into tears and was indignant that she was saying such a thing, since he had deliberately traveled only to areas known for their beauty and had courted her with all his might. The girl grabbed her head, wondering if this was the conversation of a wandering poet who sang of destruction and the queen of mercenaries. The priest decided to change the subject and asked how our heroine was feeling. Wolfgang immediately said that he had always told her to take care of her health. Adelaide added that Noel had said that she was feeling better, but was she still not feeling very well? The girl asked to tell how they found out about all this and came here. The guys reported that they came to the hotel, and the young man reported that she was most likely in the church. Dianta started to get angry when she found out that the head of the Information Guild reported everything to them. It wasn't enough for him to call these two. He also gave away her location. Meanwhile, in the northern lands, the Duke thought that he no longer felt anything. Only in the capital, his body was completely covered with chills and excruciating pain. But in return, he was enveloped in a previously unknown warmth. When the young man returned to the north, he could no longer remember those feelings, no matter how hard he tried to grasp onto them. At first, he regretted his choice. Why did he run away? Maybe the guy was afraid that having met her face to face, he would want to drag out time even more. Or maybe the young man was simply afraid to realize that they would never meet again. For the first time, Iberk wanted to take her and showed greed. And then, when reality appeared right in front of him, he left of his own free will. The dangerous visits stopped, and that is right. Dianta would probably say that there are such people everywhere, and frowned menacingly. Therefore, it is best to remain in this place. However, knowing this, why does his heart day by day only become heavier? The next day, the princess herself came to visit our heroine. The girl thought to herself that she had been with these two and had returned as soon as her head began to hurt. But how could this have happened? Does misfortune never come alone? Deborah was gathering her thoughts to voice the reason why she had come so abruptly. Valerian told her not to worry and to speak more boldly. Suddenly, Her Highness asked what she thought of her half-brother, Prince Livios. The girl did not expect such a question and exclaimed in what sense she thinks of him only as a prince. Then she clarified that she really came all this way just to ask this. But why Deborah replied, because he likes Dianta. The brother told the emperor that he had a lover, and she believed that Lady Valerian was the one. Our heroine did not expect such a turn of events, and asked if he was even in his right mind. After which, she suddenly realized that she had blurted out such a thing right in front of a member of the royal family. But unexpectedly, the princess agreed with her and replied that he was really crazy and she felt very sorry for him. She believed that this would turn out badly for their imperial family, so she held back, but not with her brother. Therefore, if he suddenly confesses to her, then let her interrupt him with the phrase that he is already meeting with that night in order to draw a line of demarcation. While Dianta was thinking about what to answer, Deborah muttered that she had apparently gone too far, but the girl objected that she had not. It must have been hard for her to come to this estate, so thank you very much. The princess replied that once at a ball, Lady Valerian told her that she needed to be more impudent. And she and Duchess Raffaello are best friends. She doesn't have such good feelings, and even though they ran into each other on the balcony completely by accident, she is very grateful to her. So she plucked up her courage and came. Our heroine was very confused. Had she really managed to influence the character of Her Highness? Deborah continued that everyone always said that she was to blame, the reason why the personal maid was scared. And crying was because she looked at her in a scary way. And a close lady spread rumors about her, so they did not get along, and all because the girl could not manage personal connections. After this, the princess became acutely aware of any talk about herself. That day was also the same. She blamed the Duchess and vented her anger. So the atmosphere changed dramatically, and everyone assumed that it was just Deborah mocking her. Surely all those people were punished, and she in the end also acted the same way, for better or worse. Our heroine replied that there was no need to worry, her friend Sharon would help. Even if someone is angry, it will be enough to sincerely apologize, and everything will immediately pass, although apologizing is still not easy. When the princess asked if she wanted to say that she needed to be bolder this time, Dianta replied that she did and hugged her, after which she added that this was very commendable, so let him stay like this for just a little while longer. After Deborah left, the girl locked herself in her room because her parents did not understand what was happening. First, gifts from the prince. Now the princess was coming. They needed to talk about what was going on. The elder brother also shouted that Her Highness had really come to their estate. Our heroine sat and thought that they were too hectic, so she would never open the door. Dianta sat down to sort out everything that had happened today. First came the meaningful words spoken by the Lord Clergyman. Then her old friends, whom she had not seen for a long time, appeared. And finally, the words of His Highness Prince Livios. These are definitely all the harbingers of the apocalypse. She should get ready as soon as possible. But why does she need all this? The girl was very angry. But still, what outraged her most was the ungrateful traitor Eberk. While she was freaking out, she hit her foot hard and thought to herself that she couldn't concentrate because all this seemed to be happening because of the Duke. She just needs to forget. But the more she wants, the more she remembers. Is she really that disappointed? Perhaps just go north, grab the young man by the collar and shake him well. But still, because of the prince, the question of marriage arises, because if the emperor orders it, the pope will not be able to refuse him. His Highness, no matter how you think about it, is completely unsuitable for her as a groom. From time immemorial, her betrothed must be handsome and have good skills, and also the beloved must be cold to others, but warm to her, his woman. When the image of the Duke popped into her head, our heroine began to get angry at herself, because what did she even imagine? Dianta would never marry into the imperial family, better with anyone else. It seems that nothing can be done to avoid marriage. She will have to run away to where she cannot be reached. Marrying the crown prince will certainly make her life more sophisticated, but if she is with him, she will become enemies with the princess and many other acquaintances, including Noel. Meanwhile, the father was telling his wife that it would be better to come again tomorrow morning. The brother replied that he was very curious, could he ask now? But suddenly, the animals opened up, and our heroine exclaimed that it was very good, since they were just then all assembled. After which, the girl announced that she had made a decision. She was going to the northern lands.